Please let me stay. I won't let you
Sir, I
down.
have nowhere else to go.
Annie's voice trembled from the cold, standing across from Nathaniel Whitmore. Just inside the front doorway, he took a slow sip of wine, his eyes fixed on her over the rim of the glass. His voice came out low. How did you get in? Are the guards at the gate not doing their jobs? The outer gate wasn't locked, sir. I just followed the path with the lights. Annie shivered as she explained, both hands now gripping the worn strap of her backpack. I know this sounds crazy, but it's so cold outside. I don't have anywhere to go. This is not a charity house, young lady. Nathaniel set the glass down on the table with a quiet click. Get out before I call the police. I tried, sir. The one I knew was full. I can work. I can clean. I can wash dishes. I don't need a bed. A chair is fine. He spoke in a cold voice. You came to the wrong house. You want money, don't you? Nathaniel said, his voice low and dry. Don't stand here making trouble, girl. Please, sir. Annie took one step forward, then stopped and stepped back. I don't need money. I can work. I cook very well. I know how to clean, and I know how to keep quiet. I won't bother you. Just a small corner in the storage room or the basement would be enough. Nathaniel looked at her. His eyes moved from her wet shoes to the backpack in her hands, then stopped on the dark bruise around her trembling wrist. You're running from something, Nathaniel said. His tone was certain, but empty, and I hate unnecessary trouble. I'm not bringing trouble to you, I swear. Annie's voice cracked. I don't need money. I can work. I cook very well. I know how to clean, and I know how to keep quiet. I won't bother you. Just a small corner in the storage room or the basement would be enough. Behind him, Mrs. Evelyn Brooks stood near the sideboard with a folded napkin in her hands. She's freezing, Evelyn said. Nathaniel did not turn. People survive worse. Yes, Evelyn said, but not everyone remains human afterward. Nathaniel looked at Annie again. What's your name? He asked. Annie Carter, sir. Where are your parents, Annie Carter? My mother passed. The man at home isn't my father. Not anymore. Then call the police if you're in danger. Annie's mouth tightened. Police don't always hear girls like me the first time. He moved his hand toward the phone on the table. Evelyn spoke again, softer this time. Mr. Whitmore, if Miss Grace were out there tonight, what would you want someone to do? Nathaniel turned then. Do not, he said. Evelyn held his gaze. I'm not saying she's Grace, Evelyn said. I'm saying it is 20 degrees outside. I'm sorry, Annie said. For what? Evelyn asked. Annie pointed to the floor. The water. I didn't mean to track snow inside. Nathaniel noticed. Evelyn walked to her gently. Come away from the door before you catch your death. Annie stepped farther inside. When Annie thought every last bit of hope had gone out, she turned slightly toward the door, ready to step back into the white sheet of falling snow. Then Nathaniel's voice came from near the dark stairway. The servants' room is at the end of the first-floor hall. She froze. He kept his voice cold because cold was simple. One night. You'll eat in the kitchen, sleep where Mrs. Brooks puts you, and leave in the morning. You will not wander. You will not go upstairs. You will not touch anything that does not belong to you. Understood? Yes, sir. And do not mistake this for charity. Annie nodded. I won't. For a few seconds, she could not move. Then one rare warm tear slid down her cold cheek. Thank you, she called after the shadow of him as he began to disappear down the hall. What should I call you? Nathaniel. He did not turn back. And tomorrow, when the snow melts, you leave. Annie lowered her eyes. Thank you, Mr. Nathaniel. From the kitchen came the low murmur of Evelyn's voice, the scrape of a chair, and then silence. A few minutes later, softer than a prayer, Annie said, May I save half for tomorrow? Nathaniel closed his eyes. For years, nothing had reached him. Not profit, not praise, not pity. Not the anniversaries of death marked by expensive flowers on polished stone. Outside, snow covered the long driveway. Inside, Annie Carter took her first warm bite in 2 days. Not knowing the man who had let her stay had not truly let anyone enter his house in years. Evelyn glanced back at Annie as they reached the kitchen. You can breathe, child. The house won't bite. Annie gave a small, nervous smile. I'm trying not to touch anything. That's wise in this house, Evelyn said, but not unkindly. Mr. Whitmore likes things where he left them. Has he always been like that? Evelyn slowed a little. No. She took down a bowl, filled it with soup from the stove, and set it on the small kitchen table. Sit. Evelyn placed a spoon beside the bowl. Eat slow. You look like you haven't had a real meal in a while. I ate yesterday, Annie said. Evelyn looked at her. Annie lowered her eyes. Half a pack of crackers. That is not eating. Annie picked up the spoon, then stopped. May I save some? For later? For tomorrow, Annie said. If that's all right. Evelyn's voice softened. There will be food tomorrow. From the dining room, Nathaniel heard everything. From the kitchen came Evelyn's low voice. You got people looking for you? There was a pause. One man, Annie said. Your stepfather? Yes, ma'am. Is he the one who hurt your wrist? Another pause, longer this time. I fell. Evelyn did not answer right away. Child, I have lived too long to argue with the first lie a frightened girl tells. Annie's spoon stopped. I'm sorry, Annie whispered. You don't owe me an apology for surviving. Nathaniel stood and walked toward his study. Thank you, Mrs. Brooks. You can call me Mrs. Evelyn if that sits easier. Yes, ma'am. You always this polite? Annie gave a faint shrug. It helps. That answer made Evelyn look at her again. Being polite should not have to be armor. Annie tried to smile. It's lighter than fighting. I'll show you where you can sleep, Evelyn said. Annie rose at once and reached for the bowl. I can wash it. In the morning. I don't mind. I said in the morning. Annie froze at the firmness, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. Evelyn softened her tone. You're safe for tonight. Let that be enough. Annie followed her down the first-floor hall. For Annie, this house was enormous, but it also felt terribly cold and lonely. She stopped in the doorway. This is too much. It's a bed, Evelyn said. I can sleep on the floor. You will not. Annie stepped inside slowly. Evelyn pulled a spare blanket from the closet and laid it on the bed. Bathroom is 2 doors down. Towels are in the cabinet. If you need something, knock on my door. It's across from the pantry. Annie looked at the bed, then at Evelyn. Why are you being kind to me? Evelyn's face changed. Because somebody should have been kind before you had to ask a stranger. If this moment touched your heart, please like this video. Comment where you are watching from and subscribe to the channel for more emotional and inspiring stories. Annie wiped them away with the heel of her hand. Evelyn pretended not to notice. Get some rest. Before she left, Annie spoke again. Mrs. Evelyn? Yes? Mr. Nathaniel, is he always that cold? Evelyn looked down the hall toward the rooms where the old grief lived. No, baby. He is not cold. Cold things don't hurt. That man is frozen around a wound he never let bleed. Annie did not fully understand. The next morning, Nathaniel came downstairs later than usual. What stopped him at the foot of the stairs was not sound, but smell. Coffee, butter, toasted bread, something warm in a skillet. He frowned and followed it to the kitchen. Annie was there, moving carefully between the counter and the stove. She turned and froze when she saw him. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't steal anything. Mrs. Evelyn said I could use the kitchen if I cleaned after myself. I was going to make breakfast before I left. Nathaniel looked at the stove. You were told to leave in the morning. Not open a diner. I know, sir. I just thought, people work better after eating. I don't work in my kitchen. No, sir. I meant everyone else. Evelyn entered behind him, tying her apron. She asked permission, Evelyn said. And before you say it, no, the house has not collapsed. Nathaniel ignored the edge in her voice. We have a chef. Not at 6 in the morning, Annie said, then seemed to regret speaking. I'm sorry. Annie set the plate down near him but did not push it closer. You don't have to eat it, she said. I just didn't want to leave food half done. Nathaniel looked at the plate. The memory came and went fast. He picked up a fork. Anandal took one bite of potato. He set the fork down. Annie's shoulders sank. Is it bad? Nathaniel looked at her, then back at the plate. No. Annie nodded, relieved. I can clean everything before I go. Right then, Annie's phone rang. The sound was small, but Annie flinched so hard the edge of her hand struck the counter. She reached into her backpack with fingers that had gone clumsy. The screen lit up before she could turn it over. Then a new message appeared. Only a few words. "I know where you are." Annie locked the screen at once, but it was too late. Nathaniel had seen it. For the first time in many years, something very close to worry moved through him. Finally, he said, "Finish breakfast first." Annie blinked. "Sir? You heard me." He turned and walked out before the room could make anything tender out of it. But as he passed the dining room, he noticed the long table waiting in silence, its polished surface empty now. For once, the kitchen behind him sounded more like a home than the mansion ever had. Nathaniel did not go far. He stopped in the dining room, where the table stretched beneath the chandelier like a polished runway no one used anymore. Behind him, in the kitchen, Annie had gone quiet. So had Evelyn. The phone had stopped ringing, but the message stayed in the room as if someone had spoken it aloud. "I know where you are." He had spent enough years around threats to understand the shape of one. Men who wanted money often wrote too much. Men who wanted fear needed only a few words. Nathaniel stood beside his chair, one hand resting on the back of it. He told himself it was none of his business. The girl had been given one night. Morning had come. Snow or no snow, threat or no threat, she had entered his house uninvited and brought whatever life she had been running from to his door. Then he looked toward the kitchen again. Annie was still standing near the counter when he returned. Her face had changed. The color that breakfast had brought back was gone. Her phone was in her fist, screen down, as though turning it over could make the message disappear. Evelyn had set her mug aside. "Who sent that?" "No one," Annie said too quickly. Nathaniel's voice was flat. "No one knows where you are?" Annie looked at him, then away. "It was probably just someone messing with me. Do they often mess with you by tracking your location?" She pressed her lips together. Evelyn moved closer, but not too close. "Annie," the girl's shoulders sagged a little. "It's Marcus." "Your stepfather," Nathaniel said. She nodded. "How did he get your number?" "It's my phone. He pays for it sometimes when he wants to know where I am. Sometimes he cuts it off when he wants to punish me." She swallowed. "I thought it was dead last night. Maybe it turned back on when I charged it in the room." Nathaniel looked at the phone. "Give it to me." Annie pulled it closer to her chest. "No." It was the first sharp word she had spoken since she arrived. Evelyn noticed. Nathaniel did too. "I'm not stealing your phone," he said. "I know." Annie's voice softened, but her hand did not move. It's the only thing I have that's mine." That answer struck the room differently than fear. Nathaniel had owned buildings he had never visited, companies he had sold without remembering the names of their founders, art kept in climate-controlled storage for tax reasons. Annie had one cheap phone and could not let it go. He reached into his jacket, took out his own phone, and placed it on the counter between them. "Then keep yours. Read the message again." Annie shook her head. "Read it. I know what it says. I want the number." For a moment she did not move. Then, with a hand that trembled despite her effort to steady it, she unlocked the screen and showed him. The number was not saved under a name. Nathaniel read it once and handed his own phone to Evelyn. "Write it down." Evelyn did. Annie looked alarmed. "Please don't call him. I had no intention of speaking to him." "Then what are you doing?" "Remembering." The answer did not comfort her. She stepped back. "I should leave." Evelyn frowned. "In this weather?" "He knows I'm here." "He says he knows," Nathaniel said. "That is not the same thing." "You don't know him." "No," Nathaniel said. "But I know men who use fear because it costs less than force." Annie stared at him, uncertain whether to trust the sentence or the man who said it. Nathaniel picked up the fork again and looked down at the breakfast she had made. He had only taken one bite. The potatoes were cooling. The coffee smelled stronger now. Outside the kitchen windows, snow drifted past the glass and blurred the garden into white. "Sit down," he said. Annie blinked. "What?" "You cooked. Sit. I should clean first. You should eat before you fall over." She looked at Evelyn, who lifted her chin toward the chair. Annie sat slowly, as if expecting the order to change. Evelyn filled a plate for her without making a fuss. Annie ate in small bites at first, then faster when hunger overcame manners. Nathaniel watched for a few seconds before looking away. Watching people need things made him uncomfortable. The house phone rang at the far end of the kitchen. Evelyn answered, listened, and glanced at Nathaniel. Front gate. Nathaniel took the receiver. Mr. Whitmore, came the voice of Carl Jensen, one of the morning guards. There's a man at the outer road asking about a girl. Says she may have come this way. Annie's fork stopped against the plate. Nathaniel's eyes stayed on the window. Description? White male, mid-40s maybe, brown coat, gray pickup parked near the service entrance. Says his daughter ran off and might be confused. Annie whispered, I'm not his daughter. Nathaniel heard her. Carl continued, he's asking if we saw anyone. Says he's worried sick. Do not let him through, Nathaniel said. Yes, sir. Should I tell him anything? Tell him this is private property. If he refuses to leave, call Greenwich police. There was a pause. Yes, sir. Nathaniel hung up. Annie stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. I need to go. If he knows I'm near here, he'll make trouble for you. He is already making trouble. That's why I have to leave. Evelyn's voice hardened. Leave and go where? Back to him? No, I don't know. Somewhere else. Nathaniel looked at her. You have no coat fit for the weather, no money, no working plan, and a man waiting on the road. I've handled him before. That bruise on your wrist suggests otherwise. Annie flinched, not because he was cruel, but because he was right. I didn't ask you to save me, she said. No, Nathaniel replied. You asked to stay. The words stopped her. She looked at him as if she had forgotten her own plea. Evelyn rested a hand on the back of Annie's chair. Eat your breakfast. Annie shook her head. Mrs. Evelyn, you don't understand. Marcus doesn't get tired. He can be sweet in front of people. He'll say I'm unstable, that I stole from him, that I lie. He'll make it sound like I'm the problem. Nathaniel's mouth tightened. There were people in the world who understood the value of a public story better than the value of truth. He had buried his wife and child under headlines that called the ransom effort botched, as if grief were a business failure. What did you take from him? He asked. Nothing. Then why would he say it? Because people believe men like him before they believe girls like me. No one spoke for a moment. It was Evelyn who broke the silence. Mr. Whitmore. Nathaniel knew that tone. It meant she expected him to remember he was still a man, not only a name on buildings. He looked at Annie. You will not leave through the front gate. You will remain inside until the road is clear. Annie's eyes widened. But you said, when the snow melts. The snow has not melted. It will. Then we will discuss it when it does. That was as close to kindness as he could make himself sound. Annie seemed to understand that. She sat down again. But she did not eat. Her eyes were wet, and she looked angry at herself for it. Nathaniel turned to Evelyn. Get her something warmer from storage. A proper coat. Gloves. Boots if we have any. Annie shook her head. I can't take. You are not taking. You are using. There's a difference? In this house there is. Evelyn gave him a long look, the kind that could have become a smile if he had allowed it. Then she went to the pantry hall. Nathaniel remained by the counter. Annie folded her hands in her lap, trying to steady them. Why? She asked. He looked at her. Why are you helping me now? He could have said because the weather was bad. Because Evelyn would not let him hear the end of it. Because he did not like men who threatened women. All of those were partly true. None were the reason standing in the room. Instead, he said, I dislike being pressured. Annie let out a small breath that was almost a laugh, though not quite. That's the reason? For now, a faint sound came from the front of the house, an engine moving slowly beyond the gate, then fading. Annie heard it and went still again. Nathaniel walked to the security panel near the kitchen entrance. The camera showed a gray pickup rolling past the outer wall. Slow enough to be watching. The driver's face was partly hidden by the brim of a cap, but Annie did not need a clear view. Her body recognized him before her eyes did. That's him, she whispered. Nathaniel studied the screen. Marcus Reed drove like a man who wanted to be noticed and feared at the same time. He did not stop. He did not have to. The message had done what it was meant to do. Nathaniel switched off the monitor. Annie looked smaller than she had a minute earlier. Finish your breakfast, he said. I'm not hungry anymore. Eat anyway. She gave him a tired look. You always this bossy? Evelyn, returning with a wool coat over one arm, stopped in the doorway. Nathaniel looked at Annie. For one brief second, the corner of his mouth moved, so slightly it might have been nothing. Usually more. Evelyn's eyebrows rose. Annie noticed it too. The fear did not leave her. But something else entered the kitchen, something thin and cautious. Not safety yet. Not trust. Maybe the smallest beginning of both. She picked up her fork and took another bite. Nathaniel did not stay to watch. He walked toward his study, already thinking of the number, the truck, the guard's hesitation, and the name Marcus Reed. He had built a fortune by seeing patterns before other men admitted they existed. This pattern was simple: a frightened young woman, a man circling the gate, a threat sent before breakfast. By noon, Nathaniel had called Daniel Price. "Run a name for me," he said when his attorney answered. Daniel sighed. "Good morning to you too. Marcus Reed, Connecticut, probably Bridgeport, assault, debt, domestic complaints, anything you can find." A pause. "Do I want to know why?" Nathaniel looked through the study window at the snow falling over the driveway. In the kitchen behind him, for the first time in years, someone was washing dishes and humming under her breath. "No," he said, "but you will." Daniel Price arrived at the Whitmore estate a little after 1, driving a black Audi that looked too clean for the weather. The snow had slowed but not stopped, and the tires whispered over the wet driveway as the outer gate closed behind him. From the kitchen window, Annie saw the car and went still with a dish towel in her hands. Evelyn noticed. "That is Mr. Price. He is Nathaniel's attorney, not a policeman." Annie folded the towel twice, though it was already neat. "Attorneys can be worse sometimes." Evelyn gave her a look. "You've been around too many wrong people." "I know." Daniel entered through the side door, shaking snow from his coat. He was in his early 50s, silver at the temples, with the tired eyes of a man paid well to distrust everyone. He greeted Evelyn with warmth, then looked past her at Annie. His expression changed only slightly, but Annie had spent a lifetime reading slight changes. "So this is the young woman," Daniel said. Annie stood straighter. "Annie Carter, sir. Daniel Price." He took off his gloves. "You understand why I'm here?" Nathaniel's voice came from the hall. "Because I called you." Daniel turned. "You called me and gave me the name of a man with a record. A young woman in your kitchen, and no explanation that would survive a deposition. I did not ask for a lecture. You never do. That's why you need them." Annie looked between them, unsure whether this was an argument or the way rich men spoke when they trusted each other. Nathaniel entered with his cane in one hand and no expression on his face. He had changed from last night's dinner jacket into a dark sweater and trousers, but he still looked like a man dressed for distance. Daniel lowered his voice. "May I speak freely?" "You usually do." "Then here it is. An 18-year-old woman, with no verified paperwork, spent the night in your home after entering through an unlocked gate. Her stepfather has already appeared near the property. If this becomes public, people will not be kind. They will not be fair. They will not wait for facts." Annie's face tightened. "I can leave." "No," Evelyn said at once. Nathaniel looked at Daniel. "What did you find?" Daniel opened his leather folder and took out several pages. Marcus Reed, Bridgeport. 2 dismissed domestic disturbance calls, 1 assault charge reduced to disorderly conduct, unpaid gambling debts, a recent complaint from a landlord, and several small claims involving borrowed money he never repaid. Nothing clean enough to bury him. Enough to know he is not a concerned father. "He's not my father," Annie said quietly. Daniel turned to her. "Does he have any legal guardianship over you?" "No, sir. I'm 18. "Do you have identification?" Annie looked down. "He has it." "All of it?" "My birth certificate. Social security card. State ID. He said I'd lose them if I kept them, so he put them in his lockbox." Daniel let out a slow breath. Convenient for him. Nathaniel's jaw shifted. "Can we get replacements?" "Yes, but it takes time. Faster if she has any copies, school records, medical records, tax forms from work." Annie shook her head. "I worked cash most places. Diners, cleaning, a laundry. Sometimes they paid me under the table because I didn't have ID. Daniel's expression did not soften, but his tone did. That is not your failure. Annie looked surprised, as if she had expected blame. Nathaniel noticed that too. He noticed too many things now, small things he would have ignored 2 days ago. The way Annie stood near the door instead of the table, the way she kept her backpack within reach, the way she watched every man's hands before she listened to his words. Daniel closed the folder. If she stays, we need rules. Written ones. She cannot be treated like hidden staff. She cannot work without pay. She cannot be isolated. And, Nathaniel, you cannot bark orders and assume the world will understand your intentions. I do not care what the world understands. You should. The world ruins people for sport. Evelyn folded her arms. Then write the rules. We have paper in this house. Daniel looked at Annie. Do you want to stay here today? Annie hesitated. She glanced at Nathaniel, then at Evelyn. I don't want to cause trouble. That is not what I asked. Her hand went to the bruise on her wrist, then dropped quickly. I don't want to go back outside. Good, Daniel said. That is an answer. Nathaniel turned toward the hall. She can stay until the road is safe. Daniel followed him with his eyes. That is not a legal category. It is mine. Then let me create a better one. By mid-afternoon, Daniel had drafted a simple temporary work agreement. Annie would help Evelyn in the kitchen and laundry for limited hours, receive fair pay, and have the right to leave at any time. She would sleep in the first-floor servants' room, have access to the bathroom and kitchen, and remain away from private family rooms unless invited. The language was dry, but to Annie it felt strange to see her name on a clean sheet of paper beside words like compensation, consent, and safety. Daniel slid the pen toward her. Read it first. Annie gave a small, embarrassed laugh. I'm not great with legal words. I'll explain any word you want, but you read before signing. Always. Nathaniel, standing near the window, looked over. You graduated high school? Yes, sir. Barely. I missed a lot when my mom got sick. What did you like? Annie blinked. In school? No, at the dentist. Evelyn looked sharply at him, but Annie almost smiled. English, she said, and home economics before they cut the class. I liked anything where you could make something out of almost nothing. Nathaniel looked back out the window. Useful skill. Daniel explained the agreement line by line. Annie listened carefully, asking about pay, hours, whether she would owe anything for food, whether the room would be taken from her if she made a mistake. Daniel paused at that last question. No, he said. You do not lose shelter for making a mistake. Annie nodded as if trying to believe him. She signed slowly, each letter careful. Evelyn signed as supervising staff. Nathaniel signed last, his name sharp and practiced. When the pen left the paper, something shifted. Not trust yet, but structure. Annie understood structure. Rules were easier than mercy. After Daniel left to file requests for replacement documents and make a few calls in Bridgeport, Evelyn gave Annie a list of light tasks. Nothing heavy. Towels from the dryer, pantry shelves, breakfast dishes. Annie took to the work with quiet focus. The house did not know what to do with her. She opened curtains in the breakfast room because she thought light might help the dust show. She wiped the windowsill, folded dishcloths into neat squares, and put a chipped mug near the sink for teaspoons. Small changes, harmless changes. Yet Nathaniel noticed each one as if she had moved furniture in his mind. By 4, Carl Jensen came in from the security office to speak with Evelyn about deliveries. He stopped when he saw Annie polishing the side table near the back hall. You still here? He asked. Annie straightened. Yes, sir. Carl looked at Evelyn. Thought she was leaving this morning. Evelyn's voice cooled. Plans changed. Carl's eyes moved over Annie's borrowed sweater, the clean socks, the folded towels in her arms. Hope Mr. Whitmore knows what he's doing. People see a girl like that around here. They start asking questions. Annie's face went still. Evelyn took one step forward. A girl like what, Carl? He shrugged. You know what I mean. No, Evelyn said. I would like you to say it plain. Carl shifted, realizing too late that Nathaniel had entered behind him. Nathaniel's voice came from the hall. So would I. Carl turned. Mr. Whitmore, I didn't mean anything by it. That sentence usually means a man meant exactly what he said and lacks the courage to defend it. Carl's face reddened. I only meant we should be careful. With strangers. Nathaniel looked at Annie. She stood very still, the towels pressed against her chest. He recognized that stillness now. It was not calm. It was a person making herself small so the room would finish hurting her sooner. Mrs. Brooks will decide where Miss Carter works inside the house, Nathaniel said. Your responsibility is the gate. Try doing that properly. Carl's mouth tightened. Yes, sir. He left. Annie lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. Nathaniel looked at her. For what? I don't know, she said, then gave a small, tired laugh. Habit, I guess. Evelyn's expression softened, but Nathaniel said nothing. He did not know how to comfort without making it worse. That evening, Annie made soup from leftover chicken, carrots, celery, onions, and rice. Nothing fancy. She asked Evelyn before using anything and cleaned as she went. The smell reached the study, where Nathaniel sat pretending to read market reports. Numbers had once calmed him. Now, the columns blurred. He came to the kitchen doorway. Annie looked up. I can make you a plate, sir. I have dinner prepared. I know, this is just soup. Evelyn stood at the stove, hiding a smile badly. Nathaniel should have said no. Instead, he said, a small bowl. Annie served it without comment. That may have been why he accepted it. At the kitchen table, he took one spoonful. Chicken, salt, rice, warmth, ordinary food, human food. For a second he saw Grace at 6 years old, blowing on soup too hot for her mouth while Eleanor told her patience was also a kind of courage. Nathaniel set the spoon down. Annie watched him careful. Too much salt? No. Too little? No. She waited. He looked at the bowl. It tastes like something. Evelyn turned away quickly. Annie did not understand the size of what he had admitted, but she sensed enough not to make a fuss. My mama used to say, a hot meal can keep a soul from breaking. Nathaniel looked at her then, really looked. Did it? Annie's smile was small. Some nights. The answer stayed with him long after the kitchen was cleaned, and the house grew quiet again. Upstairs. Nathaniel paused outside the locked door at the end of the third-floor hall. Grace's room. He had not opened it in months. Maybe longer. He placed his hand on the knob but did not turn it. Downstairs, faintly, he heard Annie and Evelyn talking in the kitchen, their voices low, ordinary, alive. He pulled his hand away from the door. For now, that was enough. The next morning, Annie woke before the house did. She had slept with her backpack beside the bed and one hand resting on the strap, but for the first time in weeks, she had not woken to shouting, footsteps, or a fist against a door. The quiet felt strange enough to scare her. She washed her face in the bathroom down the hall, folded the blanket tight at the foot of the narrow bed, and put on the wool coat Evelyn had left over the chair. It was too large, but warm. Warmth still felt borrowed, so she handled it carefully. In the kitchen, she found Evelyn already measuring coffee. You sneak around like a church mouse, Evelyn said without turning. Annie smiled. I didn't want to wake anyone. This house could use waking. Annie looked toward the long hall. Mr. Nathaniel wouldn't like that. Mr. Nathaniel doesn't like much of anything before 9. That was the first thing that made Annie laugh in the Whitmore house. It was not loud, just a small sound that escaped before she could stop it. Evelyn heard it and smiled into the coffee canister. What are you making today? Evelyn asked. I was going to ask if there's anything close to peaches. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Peaches? In December? Canned is fine. My mama made peach cobbler when the weather got mean. Said if the sun wouldn't come out, we could bake it. Evelyn looked at her for a second longer than necessary, then opened a pantry cabinet. Top shelf. 2 cans. Don't tell the chef I let you use his good cinnamon. Annie worked quietly at first, lining up flour, sugar, butter, cinnamon, and the cans of peaches. But cooking changed her. Her shoulders eased. Her hands stopped shaking. She moved as if the kitchen were a language she still trusted. Evelyn watched the girl slice cold butter into flour with a fork. Taste syrup from the peaches. Add a pinch of salt, then another. Because sweet needs something to lean on. By late morning, the smell drifted out of the kitchen and into the hall. Nathaniel was in his study, reviewing a report he had read 3 times without taking in a word. Daniel had sent an update before breakfast. Marcus Reed had debts, 2 known addresses, and a talent for staying just outside consequences. That should have held Nathaniel's attention. Instead, the smell of cinnamon kept interrupting him. He set the report down and looked toward the door. A memory came without permission. Grace standing on a kitchen stool, flour on her nose, insisting she could crack eggs. Like a professional lady. Eleanor laughing as egg ran down the cabinet. Nathaniel, younger and still capable of annoyance that softened into love, pretending to scold them both. He stood abruptly. In the kitchen, Annie had just pulled the cobbler from the oven. Evelyn stood beside her with a dish towel, looking pleased in a way she had not looked in years. Nathaniel stopped at the doorway. "What is that smell?" Annie turned, suddenly formal. "Peach cobbler, sir." "I asked Mrs. Evelyn first. I didn't ask for dessert." "No, sir. It is 11 in the morning." "Yes, sir." Evelyn coughed into her hand. It sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Annie looked at the cobbler, then back at him. "It can wait until after dinner." Nathaniel should have agreed and left. Instead, he noticed a streak of flour across Annie's cheek. She had probably brushed it there with the back of her hand. It made her look younger than 18, and for reasons he did not want to examine, it made the room feel less staged. "You have flour on your face," he said. Annie lifted one hand and wiped the wrong cheek. "No," Evelyn said. "Other side." Annie wiped her forehead. Evelyn laughed then, warm and sudden. Annie blinked, then laughed too, embarrassed but not afraid. "I promise the cobbler is cleaner than I am, sir." For one brief second, Nathaniel almost smiled. Almost. The movement was so small he felt it more than showed it. But Evelyn saw. Her laughter faded into something softer. Annie saw too, though she pretended not to. She had learned not to point at fragile things. Nathaniel turned toward the hall. "Do not burn the house down." "No, sir," Annie said, still smiling. He made it 3 steps before Evelyn called after him. "Mr. Whitmore." He stopped. "A spoonful won't kill you." He did not look back. "That remains unproven." Annie pressed her lips together, trying not to laugh again. The sound followed him anyway. Quiet and bright enough to irritate him all the way back to his study. At lunch, Evelyn placed a small dish of cobbler beside his coffee. Nathaniel looked at it as if it were a legal trap. "I said a spoonful," Evelyn told him. "You said it would not kill me." "That is not the same thing." "Then consider this a scientific trial." He picked up the spoon. The cobbler was warm, the crust soft at the edges and crisp on top. Peaches sweet with cinnamon and butter. It was not refined. It was not what his chef would serve to investors or board members. It tasted like a kitchen in bad weather. It tasted like someone had made it for people, not presentation. He took a second bite before he realized it. Evelyn pretended to adjust the coffee service. Nathaniel set the spoon down. Too much cinnamon. From the kitchen doorway, Annie's face fell. "I'm sorry. I can fix it next time." The words "next time" hung there. Nathaniel looked at her. He could have corrected it. Could have said there would be no next time, that the snow was letting up and she had already stayed longer than agreed. But Annie was standing with both hands folded in front of her, waiting not for praise, but for permission to have done something wrong without being thrown out. He looked back at the dish. "I didn't say it was bad." Annie's expression changed slowly. "No, sir." Evelyn carried the empty coffee cup away with the dignity of a woman who had just won a battle and did not need to announce it. That afternoon, Annie cleaned the pantry shelves with Evelyn. She labeled jars that had not been touched in months and found 3 kinds of flour, 4 kinds of rice, and enough canned goods to feed a shelter for a week. She did not say that last part aloud, but Evelyn seemed to know. "When you grow up counting cans," Evelyn said, "a full pantry can feel like a sermon." Annie ran a cloth over a shelf. "Or a test." "What kind?" "To see if you'll take more than you're allowed." Evelyn stopped working. "Who taught you to think like that?" Annie kept wiping the same clean spot. "Life." Before Evelyn could answer, Nathaniel appeared at the pantry entrance. "Miss Carter." Annie turned. "Yes, sir? Daniel found records of your school enrollment. Bridgeport Central. He believes it may help with identification." Annie's face tightened at the mention of school. "I missed a lot senior year." "You graduated?" "Barely. Barely is still done." She looked up. Surprised by the blunt fairness of it, Nathaniel continued. He is requesting replacement documents. Birth certificate, social security card, state ID. It may take time. Annie gripped the cloth. Will Marcus know? Not from us. The us slipped out before Nathaniel could stop it. Evelyn looked down at the shelf to hide her reaction. Annie heard it, though. Her eyes lowered quickly, but not before something grateful crossed her face. Thank you, she said. Nathaniel gave a short nod and left before gratitude could ask anything of him. By evening, the house had changed in small ways that would have gone unnoticed by anyone who had not lived inside its silence. The breakfast room curtains were open. A chipped mug sat by the sink for teaspoons. The pantry smelled faintly of lemon soap. Evelyn hummed while folding towels. Annie moved from one task to another with steady care. And the staff, even the ones who were unsure of her, had begun speaking in normal voices again. Nathaniel noticed all of it and disliked how much he noticed. After dinner, he went into the music room. The covered piano stood near the window, untouched under its cloth. Eleanor had played hymns there on Sundays, old jazz on rainy evenings, Christmas songs badly when Grace begged. After their deaths, Nathaniel had ordered the piano covered, not removed, not sold, covered. There was a difference, though he had never explained it to anyone. He found Annie in the doorway a few minutes later, holding a stack of folded napkins. I'm sorry, she said. Mrs. Evelyn asked me to put these in the sideboard. He nodded toward the cabinet. Annie stepped in carefully. Her eyes went to the piano. Does anyone play? No. My mom used to sing when she cooked, Annie said, placing the napkins away. Not well, but loud. Nathaniel said nothing. She said a house with no music starts listening to its own sadness. The sentence irritated him because it sounded simple and was not. This house does not require music, he said. Annie nodded. No, sir. She left without argument. Nathaniel stood alone with the covered piano. He told himself he would not think of Eleanor's hands on the keys, or Grace dancing barefoot on the rug, or the way laughter used to move through this room without asking permission. But later that night, passing the kitchen, he heard Annie humming while she wiped the counter. Not loud, not careless, just enough sound to prove someone alive was still awake. He paused in the hall. The tune was unfamiliar, maybe gospel, maybe something her mother had sung. It rose and fell softly, filling the space without demanding anything. Nathaniel should have kept walking. Instead, he stood there until the humming stopped. The next day, the wind kept hitting the eastern side of the house hard enough to make the old windows complain. Annie heard it first while she was folding towels near the laundry room. A sharp clatter came from somewhere above, then again, uneven and hollow. She paused with a towel in her hands. Evelyn was in the pantry checking a grocery list. Nathaniel was in his study with the door half closed. The staff kept to their usual routes, quiet and trained, not to disturb rooms that had been left alone for years. The sound came again. Annie stepped into the hallway and looked toward the staircase. The third floor sat above the house like a held breath. Nathaniel had been clear. Do not go upstairs, especially not to the rooms that did not belong to her. But the clatter grew louder, followed by the thin slap of cold air moving through a loose window. Something might break, she thought. She stood at the bottom of the stairs, torn between obedience and usefulness. All her life, doing nothing had been dangerous. If Marcus came home and a pipe leaked, a pot burned, a door stood open, it did not matter whether Annie caused it. She was blamed for not fixing it. She climbed. The third floor was colder than the rest of the house. The hall smelled faintly of cedar, dust, and closed doors. Annie moved slowly, listening. The sound came from the room at the end. Its door was not fully shut. A strip of pale winter light lay across the carpet. She whispered to herself, "Just the window. Close it and go." She pushed the door open. The room inside stopped her. It was a child's room, but not the kind a child had left yesterday. Everything had been kept too carefully. A small white bed with a quilt folded smooth. Shelves of picture books, a dollhouse near the window, riding boots lined up beside a chair, a framed drawing of a yellow sun, 2 stick figures, and a tall man with square shoulders. On the dresser sat a silver hairbrush, and a photograph of a little girl with missing front teeth, smiling as if the world had not yet learned how to be cruel. The window above the desk had blown open. Snow had begun to collect on the sill, wetting a row of children's books. Annie hurried across the room and pulled the window down. It stuck halfway. She pushed harder, bracing one hand on the desk. A small music box trembled near her elbow. She caught it before it fell. The lid opened. A thin melody began to play. Annie froze. The tune was soft and old, the kind of song a mother might wind before bed. She closed the box quickly, but not before the first notes moved into the hallway. "What are you doing in here?" Nathaniel's voice struck the room like a door slamming. Annie spun around. He stood in the doorway, one hand gripping his cane, his face drained of whatever little life the past 2 days had put there. His eyes went from the window to the music box in her hands. Annie set it down at once. "I'm sorry. I heard the window. It was open, and snow was getting in. I didn't know. I told you not to come upstairs." "I know, sir. I only came to close it. I told you not to come upstairs." The second time was quieter and worse. Annie backed away from the desk. "I'm sorry." Nathaniel stepped into the room. "Do you have any idea where you are?" "No, sir. This was my daughter's room." Annie's face changed. She looked around again, this time understanding what the neat bed and little boots meant. The air seemed to leave her body. "I didn't touch anything. I touched the window. And the box. But it almost fell. I didn't mean to open it. You had no right." "I know." "No. You don't know." His voice rose. "People like you walk into places and think an apology cleans up whatever you disturb." Annie flinched. It was small, but he saw it. Her shoulders jerked, her arms lifted halfway, not to defend an argument, but to shield her face. Her eyes went down and sideways, searching for the safest place to stand if the blow came. Nathaniel stopped. The room went silent except for the wind pressing against the glass. He had not raised a hand. He had never intended to. But Annie's body had answered a question he had not asked. Someone had taught her that anger came with hands. His grip loosened on the cane. Annie realized what she had done and lowered her arms, shame rushing into her face. "I'm sorry," she said again, smaller this time. "I know you won't hit me. She did not finish. Nathaniel looked at the bruise on her wrist, then at the neat little bed behind her. For one sickening second, the room held both girls. Grace in the photograph, Annie by the desk. One lost forever, one standing alive and terrified in front of him. "Leave," he said. Annie nodded quickly and moved toward the door, keeping distance between them. At the threshold, she stopped. "I really was only trying to close the window." Nathaniel did not answer. She left. He stood in the middle of Grace's room, breathing as if he had climbed a mountain. The window was closed. The books were saved. The music box sat on the desk exactly where it belonged, except it no longer belonged to anything living. For years, he had kept this room untouched because touching it felt like betrayal. If the dust stayed, if the quilt stayed, if the boots stayed beside the chair, then some part of Grace remained close enough to guard. But the room did not feel guarded now. It felt abandoned. A faint mark of melted snow darkened the wood near the books. Annie had been right. The window had been open. He lowered himself into the small chair beside the desk. It was too low for him, built for a child, and for a moment he looked absurd in it. Grace would have laughed. Eleanor would have told him not to break it. The thought came with such force that his chest tightened. He waited for tears. Nothing came. Downstairs, Annie went straight to the servant's room and took out her backpack. Her hands moved fast. Sweater, socks, the few things Evelyn had given her. She folded them, then stopped and put them back on the bed. They were not hers. She would not take what was not hers. Evelyn found her standing over the open bag. "Where do you think you're going?" "I broke the rule." "What happened?" "I went upstairs." Evelyn's face tightened. "To Grace's room?" Annie nodded, eyes wet. "The window was open. I heard it. I should have told you. I shouldn't have gone." Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed. "Did you take anything?" "No." "Did you mean harm?" "No, ma'am." Then stop packing like you committed a crime. He told me to leave. Did he say leave the house? Annie hesitated. He said leave. That man says a lot when he's bleeding inside. Annie wiped her face. I don't want to be another reason he hurts. Evelyn's voice softened. Baby. He was hurting long before you came. You just opened a door the wind was already pushing on. Annie sat slowly beside her. There was a picture. She was beautiful. She was. Evelyn looked toward the ceiling. Grace could talk a bird out of a tree if she wanted company. Loved cherries, hated peas, cried when anybody stepped on a beetle. Annie gave a small, broken smile. She sounds sweet. She was a child, Evelyn said. Sweet some days, stubborn others. That's what made her real. Annie looked down at her hands. Marcus used to say girls like me don't belong in nice rooms. Evelyn turned toward her. Listen to me. A room is not made holy by keeping poor people out of it. Annie's eyes filled again, but she did not cry this time. She was too tired. Upstairs, Nathaniel remained in Grace's room until the winter light began to fade. At last, he stood and reached for the music box. He had given it to Grace on her 7th birthday. She had played it every night for 2 weeks, then forgotten it for a stuffed rabbit, then returned to it whenever she was sick. He wound it once. The tune played, thin, uneven, still alive. This time he did not close it. When he finally came downstairs, the house had grown quiet around dinner. Annie was not in the kitchen. Evelyn was alone at the stove. Nathaniel stopped near the doorway. Where is she? In her room, deciding whether she has been thrown away. His jaw tightened. I did not say that. You said enough. He looked toward the hall. Evelyn stirred the pot, not looking at him. That girl went upstairs because a window was open. She saved books from snow. She touched a music box because it almost fell. She did not rob your memories, Mr. Whitmore. Nathaniel said nothing. Evelyn finally turned. You are allowed to grieve. You are not allowed to make a frightened girl pay rent on your sorrow. The words hit harder because they were not shouted. Nathaniel walked to the servants' room. The door was open. Annie stood when she saw him. I can leave tonight, she said quickly. I'll wait at the bus station. I won't cause more trouble. He looked at the backpack on the bed. Did I ask you to pack? No, sir. Then unpack. She blinked. He was silent for a moment, then added, next time something breaks upstairs, find Mrs. Brooks. Yes, sir. And the window? It's closed. He nodded once. That was all he seemed able to give. But before he turned away, Annie spoke. Mr. Nathaniel? He stopped. I'm sorry about Grace. The hallway went still. Nathaniel did not answer for so long Annie thought she had made another mistake. Then he said, without looking back, so am I. He walked away. That night, Annie did not leave. Nathaniel did not open Grace's room again, but the music box remained on the desk upstairs, its lid still raised, as if a part of the house had finally stopped, pretending silence was the same as peace. By morning, the 3rd floor stayed quiet. But the house did not feel the same. Annie noticed it while folding dish towels beside Evelyn. Nothing had moved, yet something had loosened. Nathaniel did not mention Grace's room at breakfast. He did not mention the music box or the window or the apology left hanging in the hallway. He came into the kitchen, accepted coffee, and stood near the counter while Evelyn read through the grocery list. Annie kept her eyes on the towels and tried not to breathe too loudly. After a few minutes, Nathaniel said, Daniel will be here at 10. Annie looked up. Did I do something wrong? No. That single word did not help much. Evelyn set down her pencil. He's coming about your papers, child. Your birth certificate, social security card, school records, the things Marcus kept from you. Annie's fingers tightened around the towel. I don't want to cause a legal mess. You didn't create the mess, Nathaniel said. You were handed one. She did not answer. People had said kind-sounding things before, and some of them had later used those words as proof she owed them something. Still, Nathaniel's face held no warmth, no charm, no false comfort. Oddly, that made him easier to believe. Daniel Price arrived exactly at 10, carrying a leather folder and wearing the expression of a man who had already found trouble and expected more. He greeted Evelyn, nodded to Nathaniel, then turned to Annie. Miss Carter, I need to ask you some questions. Some may feel personal. You can refuse to answer any of them, but the more I know, the more I can help. Annie sat at the kitchen table with her hands folded. Nathaniel remained standing by the window. Evelyn stayed near the stove, close enough that Annie could feel she was not alone. Daniel opened the folder. Full legal name? Annie Mae Carter. Date of birth? She gave it. Mother's name? Lillian Carter. Father? Annie's eyes dropped. I don't know. My mother said he left before I was born. Stepfather Marcus Reed was never your legal guardian? No, sir. He married my mother when I was 12. After she died, he just stayed. Daniel wrote that down. Did your mother leave a will? Annie gave a small laugh without humor. We had a couch with one good leg. No, sir. Nathaniel looked toward her, but Daniel kept his tone steady. Did Marcus ever file for guardianship, custody, anything like that? I don't think so. He never liked paperwork unless it helped him get money. Do you have any copies of your ID? No. He kept everything in a metal lockbox under his bed. Did he have access to your bank account? I didn't have one. He said banks charge poor people just for breathing. When I worked, they paid cash. I gave him most of it. Most? Annie hesitated. I hid some. In a flour tin. Nathaniel's face changed just enough for Evelyn to notice. Daniel asked, how much? $230. And where is it now? Gone. Annie rubbed the edge of her sleeve between two fingers. He found it the night I left. No one spoke for a few seconds. Nathaniel's voice was low. Is that why you ran? Annie shook her head. No, I ran because he found the community college papers. Daniel looked up. You applied? I wanted to. Culinary program in Bridgeport. I had the forms. I didn't send them yet. Why not? Application fee. And I needed my documents. What did Marcus do when he found them? Annie stared at the table. He said school puts ideas in girls' heads. Said if I wanted to cook, I could cook for him. Then he tore the papers up. Evelyn's hand stilled on the coffee pot. Nathaniel looked out at the snow piled along the hedges. Money had always been numbers to him. $1 million here, $1 billion there, losses absorbed, gains multiplied. $230 in a flour tin should not have mattered. Yet the thought of a girl saving it one shift at a time, only to have it taken by a man who called it his right, made something harden in him. Daniel closed one section of the folder. We can replace the documents. It may take effort, but it can be done. I'll request a certified birth certificate, confirm your social security record, and get a new state ID started. School records may help prove identity. Annie nodded. Will Marcus find out? Not through the requests I make, but if he has your phone account, he may track activity. We need to get you a new phone and disconnect that one. Annie instinctively reached for her pocket. I can't pay for that, Nathaniel said. No one asked you to. I don't want to owe. You owe nothing. The words came out sharper than he meant. Annie went still. Evelyn stepped in. What Mr. Whitmore means is, a phone is safety. Safety is not a luxury. Daniel nodded. We'll set it up properly. New number. Prepaid if you prefer. No shared account. And I recommend filing a police report about the threats, even if you don't want to pursue anything today. Annie's jaw tightened. Police reports don't always help. No, Daniel said, but paper trails do. Nathaniel looked at him. Explain. If Marcus escalates, we need a record. Text message. Appearance at the gate. The fact that she fled domestic violence. It matters later. Annie looked between them. Later meaning court? Possibly. The word made her shrink. Nathaniel saw it and hated that he saw it. No one is taking you to court today. That's what people say before the papers come, Annie said softly. Daniel did not dismiss it. Then we'll move one step at a time. After the questions ended, Evelyn took Annie to the pantry to give her something to do with her hands. Daniel followed Nathaniel into the study and closed the door halfway. She is in real trouble, Daniel said. I know. Do you? Because real trouble is rarely clean. Marcus Reed may not have custody, but he has enough access to her life to make noise. He can claim she stole from him. He can claim she's unstable. He can claim you're hiding her. And given who you are, People will listen. Nathaniel stood behind his desk. What do you suggest? Formalize everything. Employment agreement already helps. We add written permission from Annie to assist with documents. We file a report about the threatening text. We contact a domestic violence advocate, discreetly, and we do not let you improvise. Nathaniel looked at him. I improvise well. You buy companies well. You do not handle vulnerable humans well. The bluntness should have angered him. It did not. Can you protect her? Daniel took a breath. Legally, we can build walls. But if Marcus is stupid or desperate, walls may not stop him from throwing a rock. Nathaniel's eyes moved to the window. Then we make the walls higher. That sounds like money talking. Money is the language people taught me. Daniel studied him for a moment. And what is Annie teaching you? Nathaniel turned back, his face closing. Do your job. Daniel almost smiled. That's what I thought. In the pantry, Annie sorted cans while Evelyn pretended not to watch her. Tomatoes, beans, peaches, broth, rice. So much food. Enough to make her feel both safe and ashamed. She lined the cans by date because order calmed her. You did well in there, Evelyn said. I answered questions. Some folks never learn to do that honestly. Annie smiled faintly. Lying takes too much energy. Does Marcus know about the cooking school? He knows I wanted something that didn't include him. That's enough for a man like that. Annie put a can of peaches on the shelf. My mama used to say I had hands made for feeding people. Marcus said feeding people doesn't make money unless you own the building. Your mama was right. Annie looked down. I don't even know if the school would take me. Then we find out. Way? Evelyn gave her a sideways look. You think I'm letting you fill out forms alone? I haven't bossed people around for 60 years just to stop now. Annie laughed quietly. It was the kind of laugh that did not ask permission. Across the house, Nathaniel heard it from the study. He paused in the middle of Daniel's sentence. Daniel noticed. You heard a sound. Congratulations. Nathaniel's stare was immediate. Daniel raised a hand. I'll return to legal matters. By late afternoon, Daniel had Annie sign authorization forms. He explained each one. She read slowly, lips moving over some words, asking when she did not understand. No one rushed her. That alone made her nervous. When she signed the last page, Daniel gathered the papers. I'll get started today. Mr. Price? Yes? If Marcus calls you, he won't get through. But if he does? Daniel's voice became firm. I do not negotiate with men who steal documents from young women. Annie looked at him for a long moment. Thank you. Daniel nodded, professional again, but softer around the eyes. That evening, Annie made cornbread because Evelyn said chili was planned and store-bought bread is a confession of defeat. Nathaniel ate in the breakfast room instead of the formal dining room, though he acted as if this meant nothing. Annie did not sit with him. She moved between stove and sink, humming under her breath when she forgot to be careful. Halfway through dinner, Nathaniel looked toward the kitchen. Miss Carter. She turned. Yes, sir? The culinary program. What would you do with it? Annie wiped her hands on a towel. Learn properly. Work in a restaurant, maybe. Save up. One day, maybe open a little place. What kind? Nothing fancy. Breakfast, soup, pies. Food people can afford. A place where if somebody comes in cold, they can sit for a while. Evelyn looked down at her plate. Nathaniel's spoon paused over the chili. That is not a business plan. No, sir. Annie gave a small smile. It's just a dream. Nathaniel looked at her across the room. He had once built empires out of other men's dreams and called it strategy. Annie's dream was a room, a stove, and a chair for someone cold. For reasons he did not want to name, it seemed less foolish than most things he had funded. Later, after Daniel had left and the house settled, Nathaniel walked past the servants' room. Annie's door was partly open. She sat on the bed with the old community college website open on Evelyn's tablet, reading program requirements aloud in a whisper. Application fee, she murmured, then sighed. Nathaniel continued down the hall as if he had heard nothing. In his study, he wrote one note on the pad beside his phone. Bridgeport Culinary Program. Fees. Documents. Quietly, then he sat back and stared at the words. Outside, Marcus Reed existed somewhere beyond the gates, still circling in ways seen and unseen. Inside, Annie Carter had begun to gather the pieces of a life that had been kept from her. Nathaniel understood investments. He understood risk. He understood the difference between cost and value. For the first time in years, he wondered what it might mean to invest in a future that was not his own. The next morning brought a hard brightness over the snow, the kind that made every window glare. Annie was in the laundry room with Evelyn, folding sheets still warm from the dryer, when the front gate intercom buzzed. Once, then again. Not the soft chime used by delivery drivers, but the sharp sound of someone pressing too long. Evelyn looked toward the hall. Annie's hands stopped moving. A guard's voice came over the house phone a moment later. "Mrs. Brooks? There's a man at the gate asking for Miss Carter." The sheet slipped from Annie's fingers. Evelyn picked up the receiver. "Name? He says he's Marcus Reed, says he's her father." "He is not," Annie said, before she could stop herself. Evelyn covered the receiver and looked at her. "Go to the kitchen. Stay away from the windows." Annie did not move. Her face had gone flat, the way people's faces do when fear has no room left to show itself. "Annie," Evelyn said, firmer now. "Kitchen." Annie nodded and walked out, but her legs felt as if they belonged to someone else. The hallway stretched too long. Every framed picture seemed to watch her. By the time she reached the kitchen, Nathaniel was already there, standing at the security panel near the pantry door. The screen showed Marcus Reed at the outer gate. He looked smaller on camera than he had in Annie's memory, but not less dangerous. Mid-40s, rough beard, brown coat, work boots dark with slush. A gray pickup sat behind him on the road. He had one hand raised to the intercom and the other tucked in his pocket, like a man trying to look harmless for the record. "Annie!" His voice cracked through the speaker before Nathaniel lowered the volume. "Come on out, baby girl. I know you're in there." Annie wrapped both arms around herself. "Don't let him in." Nathaniel glanced at her. "No one is letting him in." Marcus leaned closer to the camera. "Mr. Whitmore, right? I know you can hear me. I'm just here for my daughter." She gets confused. She runs off. "I don't know what she told you, but she's got a habit of making up stories." Annie whispered, "That's what he does." Nathaniel watched the screen without blinking. The guard's voice came through from the gate. "Sir, he says he wants to speak with you directly." "No," Nathaniel said. Marcus seemed to hear enough to smile. It was not a happy smile. It was practiced. "Annie, you listening? You know how this ends. Don't embarrass yourself in front of these folks." Evelyn entered behind Annie and placed a hand at her back. "Breathe, child." "I am." "No, you're holding yourself together. That is not the same thing." Annie tried to inhale. It came in shallow. Nathaniel pressed the intercom button. "Mr. Reed, this is private property. Leave." Marcus turned his face toward the speaker. "Sir, with all respect, that girl belongs with family. She is 18. She's troubled. She is 18. She stole from me." Annie's head snapped up. "I didn't." Nathaniel did not look away from the screen. "If you believe a crime occurred, file a report." Marcus's smile thinned. "Police already know her type." Evelyn's hand tightened against Annie's back. Nathaniel's voice dropped. "Say that again." Marcus glanced at the camera and seemed to realize he had misjudged the room behind it. He spread his hands. "I'm not trying to make this ugly. I'm worried. A young black girl in a rich man's house? People are going to ask questions. I'm trying to protect everybody here." Annie shut her eyes. There it was. The dirt he liked to throw. Not enough to prove anything, just enough to stain. Nathaniel looked at Carl Jensen, who was visible on the smaller side camera near the guard post. Carl stood several feet back, arms folded, his face unreadable. "Carl," Nathaniel said through the house line, "tell him to leave the property line. If he refuses, call Greenwich Police." Carl hesitated. "Yes, sir." On the screen, Marcus began speaking louder. "Annie, you think these people care about you? You think they won't throw you out when they're done feeling good about themselves? Come home before I tell them what you really are." Annie's eyes opened. Her lips trembled, but her voice came out low. "He doesn't have a home. He has a place where people learn not to breathe too loud." Evelyn turned her slightly away from the screen. "You do not have to listen to him." Marcus stepped back from the intercom and pulled out his phone. He pointed it toward the gate. then toward the mansion beyond the trees. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "He's recording," Evelyn muttered. "Of course he is." Marcus spoke loudly for his own camera now. "I'm outside the Whitmore estate in Greenwich, where my stepdaughter is being kept from me. I just want to know she's safe." Annie backed into the counter. "He'll post it. People will believe him." Nathaniel turned from the screen. "People believe many things. That does not make them true. You don't understand. Truth doesn't matter when people already know what they want me to be." That stopped him, because it was not a plea. It was experience. The gate camera showed Carl approaching Marcus. The audio was low, but Marcus's voice rose. He was angry now, though trying not to look it. Carl pointed down the road. Marcus leaned closer, said something that made Carl look toward the house. Then Marcus laughed, got into the pickup, and drove off slowly, too slowly, past the wall. Annie did not relax. "He'll come back," she said. Nathaniel switched off the monitor. "Then he will find the gate locked. He doesn't need a gate if he finds someone to open it." Evelyn looked sharply at her. Nathaniel did too. "What do you mean?" he asked. Annie rubbed her wrist. "Men like him always find the person who thinks you're not worth protecting." The sentence sat in the kitchen longer than Marcus's voice had. Nathaniel picked up the house phone again. "Security office." A different guard answered this time. "All gate logs from last night and this morning on my desk within the hour," Nathaniel said. "And tell Jensen I want him in the study." Annie looked alarmed. "Please don't make it worse." "It is already worse. You don't know what he does when he feels cornered." Nathaniel looked at her. "No, but I know what happens when men like him are not stopped early." His voice had changed, not loud, not emotional, but there was something under it that made Evelyn glance over. It was the sound of a man remembering another time when a threat had been treated like a negotiation. Daniel arrived before noon, summoned by a call that contained more silence than explanation. Nathaniel played him the security footage. Daniel watched Marcus perform concern for the camera, then replayed the part where he implied Annie was being held. "He's building a story," Daniel said. "I know. He wants you to pay him to stop." "I know that too." Annie sat at the far end of the study, stiff in a chair too fine for comfort. "I can leave before he posts anything." Daniel turned to her. "That would not stop him. It might stop him from dragging Mr. Nathaniel into it." Nathaniel looked at her. "Do not make decisions for me. I'm trying to help. By walking back into the weather? By not being the reason your name ends up in some ugly story. My name has survived worse stories than Marcus Reed can invent." Annie looked down. "Mine hasn't." The room quieted. Daniel's tone softened. "Then we protect yours too." Annie seemed not to know what to do with that. A knock came at the study door. Carl Jensen entered, hat in hand, boots wet at the edges. He looked first at Nathaniel, then at Daniel, then at Annie. His eyes lingered a second too long, Nathaniel noticed. "Mr. Reed spoke to you longer than necessary." Carl shifted. He was upset. "That was not my question. He said he was her stepfather, said she had a history." Annie's face tightened. Nathaniel's voice remained calm. "A history of what?" Carl glanced at her again. "Running. Stealing. Lying. I don't know, sir. I just think we should be cautious who we bring into the house." Daniel watched him with interest. Evelyn, standing near the bookshelves, did not blink. Nathaniel leaned one hand on the desk. "You are paid to secure my property, not evaluate a young woman's worth." Carl flushed. "I didn't mean—" "You did. Leave the gate logs with Mrs. Brooks, then return to your post." Carl nodded and left. But Annie saw the resentment in his face. She had seen that look before. Not rage. Worse. A man deciding he had been insulted by being corrected. Daniel waited until the door closed. "That one is a liability." Nathaniel looked at the door. "Yes." Annie stood. "I should go back to the kitchen." "No," Nathaniel said. "Stay." She froze. He seemed to hear how the words sounded and adjusted. "Please." It was the first time he had said that to her. Annie sat back down slowly. Daniel gathered the papers. "We need a written incident report for today. Annie, I'll need your account in your own words. No pressure, no embellishment. Just what happened." She nodded. Okay. Nathaniel turned toward the window. Outside, the driveway curved white and silent toward the gate where Marcus had stood pretending to be family. For years, Nathaniel had believed danger arrived with phone calls, ransom demands, and men who knew the price of fear. Now it came with a cheap truck, a phone camera, and a smile. Behind him, Annie began telling Daniel what Marcus had done. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. Nathaniel listened without turning around. By the time she finished, he understood one thing clearly. Marcus Reed had not come to take Annie home. He had come to remind her she was not allowed to have one. That night, the snow returned with a low wind that dragged branches against the windows. The house had locked itself into silence again, but not the same silence as before. This one had listening in it. Nathaniel ordered the outer gate checked twice, then had the side entrances placed on camera rotation. Daniel advised against turning the mansion into a fortress because it would look bad if Marcus posted another video. Nathaniel said he had stopped caring how locks looked to people who never needed them. Daniel did not argue, but he asked Evelyn to keep Annie away from the windows after dark. Annie heard that part anyway. "I'm not a child," she said from the kitchen table, where she had been peeling carrots for dinner. Evelyn looked at her. "No one said you were. People keep saying things around me like I'm not in the room." Nathaniel, standing near the pantry door, turned at that. Annie held the peeler too tightly, but she did not look away. "You're right," he said. The answer surprised her more than an argument would have. Daniel shut his folder. "Then I'll say it plainly. Marcus wants a reaction. If he can scare you into running or frighten Mr. Whitmore into paying him, he wins either way. So tonight, you stay visible to the people protecting you, and invisible to the man trying to bait you." Annie looked at him for a long second. "That sounds like being trapped." "No," Evelyn said. "Being trapped is when nobody cares whether you get out. This is different." Annie wanted to believe that. She almost did. By 8, the staff had thinned for the night. Evelyn stayed in the kitchen, finishing a chicken stew Annie had started. Nathaniel had gone to his study. Daniel had left after making another call to Bridgeport about Marcus's prior complaints. Carl Jensen was on the late shift at the outer post, which Annie did not like. She had not said so again, but every time his name came over the house phone, her shoulders tightened. Evelyn noticed. "You don't trust him." Annie washed a knife and set it carefully in the rack. "He looks at me like I'm already guilty of something. Some people need very little evidence to reach the conclusion they wanted." The stew simmered low on the stove. Annie lifted the lid, tasted the broth, and added thyme. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "You planning to take over my kitchen?" "No, ma'am. You keep seasoning like that, I may let you." Annie smiled, but it faded when a thump came from the back of the house. Evelyn turned. Another sound followed, softer, near the service hall. "Probably the wind," Evelyn said, though she did not move toward it. Annie wiped her hands. "I'll check." "No, it might be the greenhouse door. I saw it sticking earlier." But Annie was already stepping into the hall. She knew she should call someone. She knew that. But the habit of fixing small problems before they became punishments was older than caution. She passed the pantry, moved through the back corridor, and reached the glass passage leading to the greenhouse. The lights flickered once. Outside the glass, snow blew sideways. The greenhouse was dim beyond the passage, filled with shadows of winter plants and stacked clay pots. Annie could hear the door tapping against its frame. She exhaled. Just the door. She crossed the threshold and pulled her coat tighter. The greenhouse smelled of damp soil, rosemary, and cold iron. Evelyn had asked for rosemary earlier. Annie saw the plant near the far bench and thought, as long as she was here, she could bring some back. Normal things mattered. Dinner mattered. A sprig of rosemary could make the kitchen feel like the world had not narrowed down to fear. She reached for the plant. A hand clamped over her mouth. Annie's body went rigid before her mind understood. Another arm locked around her waist and dragged her backward against a man's chest. She smelled tobacco, cheap aftershave, and wet wool. "Marcus, don't scream," he hissed into her ear. "You make noise. I swear I'll make this worse." Annie clawed at his wrist. He tightened his grip until pain shot through her jaw. "You thought you were clever?" Marcus whispered. "Hiding up here with the rich folks? Cooking breakfast like you belong?" She tried to stomp his foot. He shoved her against the potting table. Clay pots rattled. One fell and shattered on the brick floor. In the kitchen, Evelyn heard it. This time she did not call it wind. "Nathaniel," she shouted. In the study, Nathaniel looked up from a page he had not been reading. A second crash came from the back of the house, followed by a sound that was not loud, not even a full scream. But it cut through him. Annie, he was moving before he thought. His cane struck the floor hard as he crossed the hall. Evelyn came from the kitchen, face pale, phone already in her hand. "Greenhouse," she said. Nathaniel did not answer. In the greenhouse, Marcus had one hand twisted in Annie's coat. "You listen to me. You're coming out with me now. You tell them you lied. You tell them you got confused. You tell them you stole from me and got scared." Annie shook her head, tears running down her face. "No." He slapped her. The sound was small in the glass room, but it changed everything. Nathaniel reached the doorway and stopped. For 1 second, he was not in the greenhouse. He was back in another night, another winter, listening to a voice on the phone telling him where to leave the money. He saw Eleanor's ring in a plastic bag, Grace's shoe, detectives speaking gently because the worst had already happened. He remembered standing with money enough to buy a city and no power to trade it for one more breath from his child. His body locked. Marcus saw him and smiled. "There he is, the big man." Annie turned her head, one cheek reddening where Marcus had struck her. "Mr. Nathaniel." The way she said his name broke through the old room in his mind. Marcus yanked her closer. "Relax. I'm taking my girl home." Nathaniel stepped into the greenhouse. "Let her go." "Or what? You'll call your lawyer?" Marcus laughed. "You people always think paper stops men like me." Nathaniel's voice was low. "Let her go." Marcus shifted his grip to Annie's arm and raised his hand again. "She needs to learn what happens when she embarrasses me." Nathaniel saw Annie flinch before the blow came. Something inside him, something sealed for years, tore open. "Don't touch my daughter." The words struck the glass walls and came back at him. Marcus froze. Annie froze too. Evelyn stopped in the doorway with the phone pressed to her ear. Nathaniel had not planned the word. He had not earned it. He had not even understood he felt it until it was already out in the air, standing between Annie and the man who wanted to drag her back into fear. Marcus recovered first. "Your daughter?" he sneered. "You hear that, Annie? Rich man feeds you twice, and now you got yourself adopted?" Nathaniel moved closer. "Step away from her." Marcus shoved Annie toward the side bench and turned as if to leave through the far door. Annie stumbled, hit the table, and gasped. Nathaniel reached her before he reached Marcus. He caught her by the shoulders, not gripping, just steadying. She was shaking so hard he could feel it through the coat. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" His own voice sounded strange to him. "I shouldn't have come out here." Marcus was almost at the far door when 2 security guards appeared outside, running through the snow. Evelyn had been speaking to 911 and the security office at the same time, her voice calm, only because fury held it steady. Marcus cursed and bolted toward the side path. One guard slipped on the icy brick outside. The other chased him past the hedges. For a few seconds, the greenhouse held only the sound of wind, Evelyn's voice giving the dispatcher the address, and Annie trying not to cry too loudly. Nathaniel looked down and saw his hands trembling. Then he felt something warm on his face. At first he thought snow had blown in through the open door, but the drop reached his mouth, and it was salt. Another fell. Evelyn saw it and stopped speaking for half a breath. Nathaniel Whitmore was crying, not loudly, not beautifully, not in some clean, redemptive way. The tears came unevenly, like something in him had forgotten how to do it, and was learning under pressure. His face barely changed, but the water kept falling. Annie stared at him, terrified and heartbroken at once. "Mr. Nathaniel?" He looked at her bruise, her split lip, her eyes waiting for anger because that was what pain had taught her to expect. "I couldn't save them," he said, so quietly Evelyn almost did not hear. Annie did not ask who. Nathaniel looked toward the open greenhouse door where Marcus had run, then back at the girl in front of him. "But I am here now." Police lights began to flash against the snow outside, red and blue moving across the glass like a warning that had arrived late but arrived. Annie's knees weakened. Nathaniel held out one hand, careful, giving her the choice. She took it. For the first time since she had entered the Whitmore estate, she did not apologize for needing help. The police arrived with lights first, then voices. Red and blue moved over the greenhouse glass, across broken clay pots, over Annie's wet cheeks and Nathaniel's hands, still held open in front of her as if he feared one wrong movement might make her retreat inside herself again. 2 Greenwich officers entered through the side path, followed by a woman in a dark coat, with a badge clipped near her shoulder. She was in her late 50s, hair pulled back, face lined in a way that did not soften her eyes. Nathaniel knew her before she spoke. "Mr. Whitmore." "Detective Hayes." Laura Hayes looked at him for 1 second longer than the greeting required. The last time she had seen him this close, he had been standing in a police station hallway after identifying his wife's and daughter's bodies. Back then he had looked clean, expensive, and empty. Tonight, his collar was crooked, his face was wet, and his hand shook when he lowered it. Her eyes moved to Annie. "Are you Annie Carter?" Annie nodded. "I'm Detective Laura Hayes. I'm going to ask you some questions, but not here in the cold. Do you need medical help?" "No, Mo." Evelyn stepped forward. She was struck in the face. He grabbed her. "She needs to be looked at." Annie turned quickly. "I'm fine." Evelyn's voice did not bend. "You are not fine just because you are standing." Detective Hayes gave a small nod to one of the officers. "Have EMS check her. No sirens unless necessary." Annie's breathing changed. "No hospital. No one is forcing you into an ambulance," Hayes said. "But you let them look at your face and wrist. That is not punishment." The word punishment landed badly. Annie looked down. Nathaniel saw it. "Evelyn will stay with you." Annie glanced at him, then nodded. Outside, another officer came in through the greenhouse door. "We didn't catch him. Tracks go toward the service road. We found fresh tire marks near the east wall." Nathaniel turned. "He got through the east wall?" The officer hesitated. "There's a side service gate." It was unlocked. Evelyn went still. Nathaniel's voice cooled. "That gate was ordered locked." Detective Hayes looked at him. "Who had access?" "Security staff." "Names." Carl Jensen was on late shift. Hayes wrote it down. "We'll speak with him." Annie's face changed at Carl's name. Detective Hayes noticed at once. Good detectives noticed what people tried to hide. "You know him?" Hayes asked. "He works here," Annie said. "That is not what I asked." Annie swallowed. "He doesn't like me." "Why?" Annie looked toward Nathaniel, then away. "He thinks I'm trouble." Evelyn answered for her, anger tight in each word. "He thinks a young black woman in this house is automatically suspicious." One of the officers shifted, uncomfortable. Hayes did not. "Thank you," the detective said. "That matters." Annie looked surprised. Nathaniel said, "Detective, I want Marcus Reed arrested." "I'm sure you do. He entered my property, assaulted her, threatened her, and fled. And we'll handle that properly," Hayes said. "Which means statements, footage, medical notes, gate logs, and finding out whether anyone helped him get in." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "I can have my attorney here in 20 minutes. I assumed he was already on the way." He was. Daniel Price arrived before the ambulance finished checking Annie. He came through the service entrance in a wool overcoat, carrying a briefcase and wearing the expression of a man who had been expecting bad news and still disliked receiving it. He took in the greenhouse, the broken pot, Annie's lip, Nathaniel's face, then said, "Nobody speaks alone." Detective Hayes almost smiled. "Good evening to you too, Mr. Price." "Detective, you two know each other?" Evelyn asked. Daniel removed his gloves. "In my profession, you get to know the people who keep your clients from making things worse." Hayes looked at Nathaniel. "Some clients need more help than others." Nathaniel ignored both of them. "Where is Carl?" An officer answered. "Not at the guard post. We're locating him." Daniel's eyes sharpened. "Not at his post?" "No." Annie sat on a bench near the greenhouse entrance while an EMT cleaned the corner of her lip. She flinched at the touch but did not complain. Evelyn stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder, not gripping, just there. Nathaniel remained several feet away. He had learned enough tonight not to crowd her, though every instinct he had left wanted the distance closed. Detective Hayes crouched slightly, so she was not standing over Annie. "Can you tell me what happened?" Annie looked at Daniel. You can answer, Daniel said. Just tell what you know. If you need to stop, you stop. Annie nodded. Her voice was thin at first. I heard a noise near the back. I thought it was the greenhouse door. I went to check. I know I shouldn't have gone alone, Hayes said. We're not starting with what you should have done. Start with what happened. Annie drew a careful breath. I went in. I thought I'd bring Rosemary back for the stew. He grabbed me from behind. He put his hand over my mouth and told me not to scream. He said I had to come with him and tell everyone I lied. Did he strike you? Annie touched her cheek. Yes, ma'am. Did he threaten you? Yes. What did he say? Annie's eyes lowered. That he'd make it worse, that he'd ruin Mr. Nathaniel, that nobody would believe me. Hayes wrote without reacting. Has he hurt you before? The greenhouse seemed to quiet around the question. Annie's mouth opened, then closed. Evelyn's hand stayed steady on her shoulder. Nathaniel looked at the floor. He wanted to answer for her. He did not. Yes, Annie said finally. How many times? I don't know. That answer was worse than a number. Detective Hayes let the silence sit, then nodded. All right. An officer entered again. Detective, Jensen's car is gone. Guard at the North Post says he left 15 minutes before the call. Claimed he was checking the service road. Daniel muttered, convenient. Nathaniel's voice became very quiet. Find him. Hayes looked at him. We will. You do not understand. Marcus Reed did not guess his way through this property. I understand more than you think, Hayes said, and I need you to let us build a case that survives longer than your anger. The words hit him hard because they were true. Money could make noise. Anger could make demands. Neither guaranteed justice. Annie looked up. Please don't go after Carl because of me. Nathaniel turned to her. Because of you? If I wasn't here, if you were not here, Marcus would still be the man who hit you. Carl would still be the man who opened a gate. Their choices are not yours to carry. She stared at him as if no one had ever handed a burden back to the person it belonged to. The EMT finished and told Hayes Annie did not need transport unless symptoms changed. Evelyn insisted on written instructions. Daniel asked for a copy. Nathaniel asked for nothing. He simply watched Annie touch the small bandage near her lip. By 10, everyone had moved into the kitchen because Evelyn refused to let statements be taken while people stood in a freezing greenhouse. Coffee was made. No one drank much. The chicken stew sat forgotten on the stove until Annie noticed and turned the burner low. Evelyn gave her a look. Sit down. It'll burn. Let it. Annie sat. Detective Hayes took Nathaniel's statement in the breakfast room. Daniel remained beside him, though Nathaniel did not need help remembering. He remembered too well. The crash. Marcus's hand on Annie. The slap. The old paralysis in his own body before her voice pulled him back. When Hayes asked what he shouted, Nathaniel looked toward the kitchen doorway. Don't touch my daughter, he said. The pen stopped for half a beat. Daniel looked at him. Hayes kept her face professional. Is Miss Carter legally your daughter? No. Why did you say it? Nathaniel's eyes moved to the window, black now with night beyond it, because in that moment, that was the word that came. Daniel wrote something on his legal pad that had nothing to do with law. Hayes lowered her voice. Nathaniel, I need to ask this carefully. Is there anything improper about Miss Carter's presence here? His face hardened. No. Has anyone in this house touched her, threatened her, restrained her, or prevented her from leaving? No. Is she employed here? Temporarily. Written agreement. Fair pay. Daniel has it. Good. Hayes held his gaze. Because Marcus is already telling a different story. Nathaniel did not move. Daniel said, What story? One of the officers found a post online. Marcus recorded himself outside the gate earlier. Claims Annie is unstable. Claims Mr. Whitmore is keeping her from family. Implies exploitation without saying it directly. Hayes looked tired. It's starting to spread. Daniel swore under his breath. Nathaniel stood. Daniel immediately said, No. I did not say anything. You stood like a man about to purchase a newspaper just to burn it down. Nathaniel's eyes stayed on Hayes. Take it down. I'm a detective, not the internet. Said. We document it. We use it. We do not panic. Because a liar found a camera. In the kitchen, Annie heard enough. Her face went pale again. So people saw it, she said. Evelyn turned. Annie, they saw him call me unstable. Daniel entered from the breakfast room. People who believe Marcus Reed after one shaky video were never looking for truth. That doesn't make it hurt less. No, Daniel said. It doesn't. Nathaniel stood in the doorway behind him. It will be answered. Annie looked at him. How? With facts. She gave a small, bitter smile. Facts don't always win. No, Nathaniel said. But silence loses faster. The room settled around that. Near midnight, Detective Hayes prepared to leave. Marcus had not been found. Carl Jensen had not answered his phone. A bulletin had been sent out for both. The estate would have 2 patrol checks overnight, and Nathaniel hired additional security before Daniel could object. Annie stood near the kitchen table, wrapped in the oversized wool coat. Hayes approached her. I'll be in touch tomorrow. Keep the new phone Mr. Price gives you. If Marcus contacts you, do not answer. Save everything. Annie nodded. Yes, ma'am. Hayes paused. You did well tonight. Annie looked down. I was scared. That is not the opposite of doing well. After the police left, the house seemed to exhale, but no one mistook it for safety. Evelyn guided Annie toward her room. Daniel stayed behind with Nathaniel in the hall. This is going to get uglier before it gets clean, Daniel said. I know. Do you? Nathaniel watched Annie disappear down the first-floor corridor, Evelyn beside her. He used her fear to walk into my house. He used my staff. He is using the public now. Daniel closed his briefcase. Then we build the case and protect Annie. Nathaniel looked at him. And if the law arrives late? Daniel did not answer quickly. From the end of the hall, Annie's door closed softly. Nathaniel thought of the greenhouse, of her flinch, of the word daughter leaving his mouth before his mind approved it. Then he thought of Eleanor and Grace, and the money he had paid to men who killed them anyway. His voice was quiet when he spoke again. This time, he said, I will not pay a monster to disappear. Daniel studied him. Good, because this one wants more than money. Nathaniel looked toward the front windows where snow pressed against the dark glass. He wants her to believe she has nowhere to go. He turned back toward the kitchen, where Annie's stew still sat on the stove, saved from burning because even after being attacked, she had remembered to lower the flame. Nathaniel shut his eyes for a moment. The law had arrived late, but Annie was still alive. This time, late would have to be enough to start. Nathaniel did not go to bed after Daniel left. Sleep had always been a room with no door for him, but that night it felt almost insulting to try. He stood in the dark kitchen long after the house settled, looking at the covered pot on the stove. Annie's stew had cooled by then. Evelyn had put a lid on it, wiped the counter, and left a note in her neat hand. Eat something, Mr. Whitmore. Grief is not dinner. He read the note twice, then folded it and set it beside the coffee tin. The house was quiet again, but not empty. That was the problem. Emptiness had rules. Emptiness did not ask questions. Emptiness did not leave wet shoes outside a servant's room or hum while washing dishes or flinch when a man raised his voice. Emptiness did not make peach cobbler. Emptiness did not bleed in his greenhouse and still worry about burning stew. Nathaniel walked to the first-floor hall and stopped outside Annie's room. The door was closed, no light beneath it, no sound except the low hum of heat moving through old vents. He lifted one hand as if to knock, then let it fall. She did not need his confusion. He turned and took the stairs slowly. The cane tapped once on each step. On the 3rd floor, the air was colder. Grace's door waited at the end of the hall, no longer fully sealed in his mind after Annie had opened it by mistake. He stood before it, hand on the knob, and this time he turned it. The room held the night gently. Moonlight, thin and blue from the snow outside, lay across the quilt. The little boots remained beside the chair. The dollhouse stood with its tiny painted door open. On the desk, the music box sat with its lid raised, silent now. Nathaniel crossed the room and sat in the chair that was too small for him. For years, he had come here only to punish himself with preservation. He had looked at Grace's things the way a man looks at evidence. Proof of what had been taken. Proof of what money had failed to buy back. Tonight, for the first time, the room felt less like a crime scene and more like a child's room. He reached for the photograph on the dresser, Grace smiled from behind the glass, missing her front teeth. Hair uneven because she had cut one side herself before a school picture day. Eleanor had laughed so hard she had cried. Nathaniel remembered being irritated because the photographer was expensive and the appointment could not be changed. He had said something about presentation. Eleanor had looked at him over Grace's head and said, "Nathaniel, one day you'll miss the crooked parts most." He had missed them. God, he had missed them. The memory opened too fast. The call had come at 5:17 p.m. Eleanor and Grace had been taken on the road back from the riding stable. A man's voice told him not to call police. He called them anyway because that was what men like Nathaniel Whitmore did. They summoned systems, experts, force. The kidnappers demanded money. He paid. More than they asked. He emptied accounts, moved assets, put cash in bags, followed instructions down to the minute. Every dollar had felt like a rope thrown into darkness. The rope came back cut. He had seen Eleanor first in the morgue, then Grace. Someone had cleaned her face. He remembered hating them for that kindness because it made her look asleep, and for one terrible second his body believed he could wake her. Detective Hayes had stood nearby, younger then, careful with every word. Nathaniel had waited for the scream to come. It never did. His mind shut a steel door and left him on the other side of it. At the funeral, people wept around him. Evelyn wept. Daniel stood with red eyes. Nathaniel held a folded handkerchief and never used it. A reporter later wrote that the billionaire showed remarkable composure. He had cut the article out and burned it in the fireplace. Not because it was wrong, but because it was right in the ugliest way. He had not been composed. He had been gone. A sound came from the doorway. Nathaniel turned. Annie stood there in the hall, wrapped in the oversized wool coat. Her face looked small above the collar. The bandage near her lip was pale against her skin. "I'm sorry," she said. "I saw the light." He looked at the lamp on Grace's desk. He did not remember turning it on. "You should be asleep," he said. "So should you." The answer would have annoyed him from anyone else. From Annie, it sounded like a fact she was tired enough to forget to fear. She stayed outside the room. "I won't come in." Nathaniel looked at Grace's photograph in his hand, then back at Annie. "The door is open." She stepped in carefully, stopping near the rug. Her eyes moved around the room but did not linger greedily on anything. She looked the way someone enters a church after a funeral, aware that even breathing can feel loud. "She had your eyes," Annie said softly. "No," Nathaniel said. "She had Eleanor's." Annie nodded. "Maybe your sadness makes them look like yours." He almost told her she was too young to say things like that. Instead, he looked down at the photograph. She was 8. "My mama died when I was 16, Annie said. "Folks kept saying at least I had 16 years. Like love comes with a receipt and you're supposed to be grateful for whatever time got handed to you." Nathaniel's grip tightened on the frame. "People say foolish things around death. They get scared of silence." He looked at her then. Annie tucked her hands into the coat sleeves. "After my mama died, everybody brought food for 1 week. Casseroles, fried chicken, pies. Then they stopped coming. Marcus didn't stop. That was the problem." Nathaniel set the photograph back on the dresser. "Did your mother know?" "Some. Not all. She was sick. I hid what I could." Annie swallowed. "I thought if I kept the house clean, kept him fed, kept quiet, he'd leave her alone." Nathaniel knew that kind of bargaining. "Pay this and they will live. Follow this instruction, and the door will open. Be useful, be obedient, be smart enough, and the monster will become reasonable." Monsters rarely did. Annie looked at the music box. Did Grace like music? Yes. His voice roughened despite him. She liked anything that made noise. "That sounds nice." It was, until it wasn't. Annie was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Nathaniel?" "Yes?" "Do you feel like loving someone again means leaving them behind?" The question found the hidden hinge of him. He stared at her. She looked embarrassed. "I don't mean to be disrespectful. It's just, after Mama died, I felt bad any time I laughed. Like she might think I forgot her. But then one day Mrs. Alvarez from downstairs told me, 'Baby, Love doesn't replace people. It gives the living somewhere to go. I didn't understand then. I'm still not sure I do. Nathaniel turned the words over in his mind. Love doesn't replace people. It gives the living somewhere to go. He sat back in the small chair. And where did yours go? Annie's face shifted. For once, she had no ready politeness. Mostly into cooking. Into making sure people ate. Mama was always less scared after soup. He looked toward the hall, toward the floors below where her room was. And now? I don't know. She gave a tired half smile. Maybe into not running as fast. A fragile silence settled between them. Nathaniel looked again at Grace's room. The bed, the books, the small boots. For years, he had believed keeping everything untouched was loyalty. Now he wondered if it had been fear wearing a better suit. I could not save them, he said. Annie did not move. I paid. I planned. I did everything they told me. I did everything the police said not to do and everything they said to do. I would have cut my own heart out if they had asked. His voice lowered, and still they died. Annie's eyes filled, but she did not step closer. She let him have the space to say it. I know you're not Grace, he said. I know, and I do not know what I am doing. Annie nodded. Most people don't. Some just have nicer furniture while they don't. For a second, the room changed. It was not laughter. Not really. But something moved through Nathaniel's face. A crack in stone before weather widens it. Annie saw, and looked down quickly, as if protecting him from being noticed. He looked at her bandaged lip. Are you afraid here? She answered honestly, sometimes. That hurt more than he expected. Of me? Not the way I'm afraid of Marcus. That is not an answer. She took a breath. I'm afraid of being sent away. I'm afraid of doing one thing wrong and proving everybody right. I'm afraid your kindness has a time limit. Nathaniel looked at the photograph of Grace. He thought of all the rooms in this house that had become shrines to things he failed to protect. Then he thought of Annie asking permission to save soup. My kindness may be clumsy, he said, but it will not be used as a trap. She looked at him then, really looked, as if trying to decide whether a sentence could be a floor. Downstairs, a clock chimed 2. Annie wiped her eyes with the sleeve of Evelyn's coat. Mrs. Evelyn will fuss if she knows we're both awake. She fusses regardless. She cares. Yes, Nathaniel said. She does. Annie glanced once more around Grace's room. Would it be all right if I put fresh flowers here sometime? Not now. Just when the snow clears. Nathaniel's first instinct was no. The room had rules. The dead had rules. But then he imagined flowers on the dresser, not replacing the dust of years but admitting that time had not stopped just because he had. Yes, he said. Annie nodded. Good night, Mr. Nathaniel. Nathaniel, he said. She paused at the door. You asked what to call me, he said. Nathaniel is enough. A small warmth entered her tired face. Good night, Nathaniel. After she left, he remained in Grace's room. The pain was still there. It had not softened into peace. It had not become beautiful, but for the first time, it was pain he could feel without disappearing. He wound the music box once. The tune began, thin and uneven. Nathaniel sat in the child-sized chair, listening until the last note faded. Then, in the quiet that followed, one tear slipped down his face. Only one, but this time, no one had been struck. No one was bleeding. No danger had forced it out of him. It came because something inside him had finally remembered the way. By breakfast, the house had split into two kinds of quiet. One belonged to snow, soft against the windows. The other belonged to waiting. Daniel Price arrived before 9 with a folder under one arm and bad news in his face. Evelyn had just set coffee on the kitchen table. Annie was cutting apples for oatmeal, moving carefully because the small bandage near her lip pulled when she spoke. Nathaniel stood by the window with his cup untouched. Daniel did not take off his coat right away. Marcus made contact through an attorney. Annie's knife stopped. Nathaniel turned. He has an attorney? He has a man with a law license and rent due. Daniel placed the folder on the table. The message is simple. Marcus says he will withdraw all public claims, return Annie's documents, and sign a statement saying she left voluntarily. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. For what? Money. No one looked surprised. That made it worse. How much? Nathaniel asked. Daniel opened the folder. $200,000 by Friday. He calls it compensation for emotional distress, reputational harm, and personal property Annie allegedly took from his home. Annie's face went blank. I didn't take anything. We know, Daniel said. He took from me. I know. She looked at Nathaniel, shame rising before anyone had accused her. I swear I didn't. Nathaniel's voice was quiet. Annie, she stopped. You do not have to prove innocence every time a liar speaks. Her eyes dropped to the apples. It feels like I do. Daniel slid a printed email across the table. There's more. If Mr. Whitmore refuses to pay, Marcus says he will speak to every media outlet that answered his first post. He will accuse Nathaniel of hiding you, manipulating you, and using his money to keep you away from family. Evelyn made a sound under her breath that was not quite a prayer. Nathaniel picked up the paper. The words blurred for a second, not because he could not read them, but because he had seen their shape before. Pay, obey, stay quiet. And maybe the monster will give back what he already stole. His hand tightened around the page. Daniel watched him. There is a practical option. No, you didn't hear it. I heard enough. Daniel removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Nathaniel, 200,000 is less than what you lose in market fluctuation before lunch. We pay, we get the documents, we buy time, and we keep Annie out of a public fight. Annie looked up fast. No. Everyone turned to her. Her voice shook, but she did not take it back. No, please, don't pay him, Daniel said gently. This is not your burden to decide alone. He'll come back for more. He always does. If you pay him, he'll know I'm worth money now. Nathaniel looked at her. That was exactly it. Annie understood Marcus better than any legal memo could. Evelyn placed a hand flat on the table. The girl is right, Daniel sighed. Morally, yes. Strategically, not always. Nathaniel set the paper down. Last time I paid men who made threats. My family still came home dead. The kitchen went silent. Daniel's face changed. Nathaniel, no. His voice stayed low, but the word cut clean. I will not pay another monster for the privilege of hoping he becomes decent. Annie's eyes filled. She tried to hide it by turning back to the apples, but the knife trembled. Nathaniel noticed and took the knife gently from her hand. Sit down. I'm fine. You are shaking. I'm angry. So am I. That made her look at him. He handed the knife to Evelyn, who resumed cutting as if giving them both something ordinary to stand near. Daniel put his glasses back on. If we don't pay, we need to move faster. We file the police report fully, include extortion, document the threat, provide the greenhouse footage, Carl's access logs, everything. We also prepare for media. I want Carl found, Nathaniel said. Detective Hayes is working on it, but there's something else. Daniel pulled another sheet from the folder. Security logs show the East Service Gate opened at 8:14 p.m. using Carl Jensen's code. It closed at 8:19. 5 minutes later, the greenhouse sensor tripped. But no alarm sounded because the zone had been manually bypassed. Evelyn stopped cutting. Nathaniel's face did not change, but the air around him did. Carl bypassed it. Looks that way, Annie whispered. I told you. He found someone who thought I wasn't worth protecting. No one could answer that quickly. Nathaniel looked toward the hall, toward the front of the house, toward the gates beyond it. Carl had not only failed his job, he had judged Annie and acted on that judgment. He had decided a girl like her was trouble, and Marcus had used that decision like a key. Get Hayes here, Nathaniel said. Daniel nodded. Already called. She's on her way. Detective Laura Hayes arrived an hour later with 2 officers and a face that suggested she had not slept much either. She took the printed demand, the security logs, and Daniel's summary without comment. Then she asked to speak to Annie again. In here? Annie asked, looking around the kitchen. If you're comfortable. I'm more comfortable here than in rooms with big desks. Hayes sat across from her at the kitchen table. Nathaniel moved to remain, but Hayes looked at him. I need her voice, not yours. Nathaniel began to object. Annie spoke first. He can stay if he doesn't answer for me. Hayes looked at Annie. Your choice. Annie nodded. The interview was careful. Marcus's threats. The stolen papers. The money he took. The community college forms he tore up, the text message, his appearance at the gate, the greenhouse attack. Annie answered without making herself dramatic. That somehow made it worse. When Hayes asked about Carl, Annie's fingers curled into her sleeves. He looked at me like Marcus did when other people were watching. Different words, same meaning. Hayes waited, like I was the problem before I did anything. Nathaniel looked down at his hands. Hayes wrote that sentence down. After the interview, Hayes stood in the pantry hall with Nathaniel and Daniel. We can pursue extortion and assault. The gate logs help. If we find proof Carl took money, that strengthens conspiracy or facilitation. But Marcus may keep pushing the public story. Then we answer publicly, Nathaniel said. Daniel looked at him. Careful. I am done being careful in ways that only protect the person lying. Hayes studied him. A public statement could help, or it could turn Annie into a spectacle. Nathaniel looked toward the kitchen where Annie sat with Evelyn, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. Not without her consent. Daniel's eyebrows lifted. Good. You are learning. Nathaniel ignored him. By noon, Carl Jensen was found at his sister's house in Stamford. Detective Hayes called with the news. He admitted leaving the post but denied taking money. Then an officer found $5,000 in cash in his glove compartment, wrapped in a grocery bag. He changed his story twice before asking for a lawyer. Evelyn, when told, closed her eyes. $5,000. Annie looked at her. That's a lot of money. For betraying someone's safety, Evelyn said. It is not enough to buy a soul, but men sell them cheaper every day. Nathaniel stood at the counter, listening. The phrase stayed with him. Sell a soul, buy silence, pay monsters. His whole life had been built around price. But Marcus and Carl had reminded him there were things money did not solve. It only revealed what some people had already chosen to be. That afternoon, Daniel drafted a statement. It was clean, factual, bloodless. Nathaniel read it once and put it down. No, Daniel leaned back. It says everything necessary. It says nothing human. That is often the point of legal statements. Not this time. Annie was in the doorway with a basket of folded towels. A statement about me? Daniel looked at Nathaniel, then back at Annie. Yes. Nothing goes out unless you approve it. She held the basket tighter. What does it say? Daniel handed her the page. Annie read slowly. Her face tightened at phrases like temporary resident and alleged domestic dispute. I sound like paperwork, she said. Daniel accepted that without offense. Paperwork protects people. Sometimes it hides them. Nathaniel looked at her. What would you say? Annie froze. Me? Yes. I don't know. I'm not good at speeches. I did not ask for a speech. She looked at the paper again, then spoke quietly. I'd say I came here because I was cold and scared. I'd say I asked for food and a place to sleep. I'd say I'm 18 and nobody owns me. I'd say being poor doesn't make me a liar. Evelyn's eyes softened. Daniel took back the page and made a note. That line stays. Nathaniel looked at Annie. Anything else? She hesitated. I'd say I didn't come here to embarrass anybody. I came because I wanted to live. The room went still. Daniel wrote that down too. In the evening, Nathaniel called a meeting in the breakfast room. Daniel, Evelyn, Detective Hayes on speaker, and Annie, if she wished. She came, but sat near the door. Daniel laid out the plan. Full police cooperation, evidence preserved, no payment, no private meeting with Marcus, replacement documents accelerated, new phone activated, statement released only after Annie approved. If Marcus posted again, they would answer with footage and facts. If any outlet repeated defamatory claims, Daniel would respond. Annie listened, her face pale but steady. When Daniel finished, Nathaniel spoke. Marcus Reed asked for money to return what was never his. He will not receive it. Carl Jensen decided your safety could be sold. He will not work here again. And if the public wants a story, they will hear the truth, not his version of it. Annie looked at him. Why are you doing all this? He could have said because it was right. Because Evelyn demanded it. Because Daniel had a plan. Instead, he looked at the girl who had saved half a bowl of soup for tomorrow. Because silence is where men like Marcus grow. Evelyn nodded once, Later that night, after the statement was revised, Annie found Nathaniel in the kitchen. He stood by the stove, heating leftover stew badly. The flame was too high. "You'll scorch it," she said. He stepped back. "Then intervene." She took the spoon from him and lowered the heat. For a few moments, they stood side by side, not speaking. Then Annie said, "Justice doesn't always feel fair, does it?" Nathaniel looked at her. She stirred the stew. "Even if he gets arrested, I still lost my money, my papers, my school forms. Years. Mama." Her voice thinned, but held. "It doesn't give all that back." "No," Nathaniel said. "Justice is not always fair when it finally arrives, but it still matters to the wounded." Annie looked at him, then down at the pot. "Did you just make that up?" "I have had years to think about unfair things." She gave a small, tired smile. "It was pretty good. It was accurate." That too. The stew warmed slowly. Outside, the snow had begun to melt along the edges of the driveway, leaving dark lines of pavement showing through. Annie noticed through the window. "You said when the snow melts, I had to leave." Nathaniel followed her gaze. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he reached for 2 bowls from the cabinet. "The snow is not finished melting." Annie did not argue. She ladled stew into the bowls, and for the first time, she made one for herself without asking if she was allowed. By morning, the driveway was no longer quiet. News vans sat beyond the outer gate, their satellite dishes lifted toward the gray sky. Reporters stood in winter coats, stamping their feet in the slush, talking into cameras as if they had discovered the house by accident, and not because Marcus Reed had handed them a story shaped like a weapon. Annie watched from the breakfast room window until Evelyn gently pulled the curtain back into place. "Don't feed your fear by staring at it," Evelyn said. Annie stepped away. "They're talking about me. They're talking about the version of you they can sell before lunch. That doesn't make it better." "No," Evelyn said, "but it makes it smaller." In the study, Daniel Price had already taken 3 calls and declined 4 interviews. He stood beside Nathaniel's desk with a marked-up statement in his hand while Detective Hayes listened from speakerphone. Nathaniel stood by the fireplace, dressed in a dark suit, his face composed in a way that looked familiar to the world and false to everyone in the house. Daniel read the final line aloud. "Miss Carter came to this home seeking temporary shelter during severe winter weather. Any allegation that she was held against her will, or that she stole from Marcus Reed, is false and unsupported by evidence." Nathaniel looked toward the hallway. "It still sounds like it was written by men afraid of being sued." "It was," Daniel said, "because men afraid of being sued tend to keep people out of court." Detective Hayes spoke through the phone. "The statement is safe. Safe may not be satisfying, but it helps." "It doesn't say enough," Nathaniel said. Daniel sighed. "What do you want it to say?" Nathaniel did not answer at once. He looked through the study doorway, where Annie stood half-hidden in the hall, wearing Evelyn's wool coat over a plain sweater. She had not been invited in, but nobody told her to leave. "I wanted to say she is not a rumor," he said. Annie's eyes lifted. Daniel lowered the paper. "Then you may have to say that yourself." By 10 o'clock, Marcus had posted another video. This one was worse. He stood near a gas station somewhere off I-95, eyes red, voice breaking on command. He said Annie had mental struggles. He said she had always been difficult. He said Nathaniel Whitmore had no business keeping a vulnerable young woman away from family. He never said black in the video. He did not have to. The comments did the work for him. Daniel showed Nathaniel only a few before shutting the laptop. "Don't read them. I have been hated by people with more money than judgment," Nathaniel said. "This isn't about you." That landed. Across the room, Annie spoke. "Can I see?" "No," Evelyn said at once. Annie looked at Daniel. "If people are saying things about me, I should know." Daniel hesitated. Nathaniel said, "No." Annie's face tightened. "You don't get to decide what I can handle." The room went still. Nathaniel looked at her. She was afraid, but she was standing. Not shrinking, not apologizing. A day ago, he might have confused protection with control. Today, the difference stood in front of him. "You're right," he said. Daniel turned the laptop toward her but kept one hand near the trackpad. "A few, not all. There's no wisdom in drinking poison because someone put it in a cup." Annie read 3 comments. Her expression barely changed. which told Evelyn exactly how deeply each one cut. One called her a thief. One called her a setup. One asked what a girl like that was doing in a house like his. Annie pushed the laptop back. That's enough. Evelyn touched her shoulder. Baby, I'm all right. Annie swallowed. No. I'm not. But I'm still here. Nathaniel looked at Daniel. We answer now. Daniel nodded slowly. Then we do it clean. Outside the front entrance. Short statement. No questions unless I approve. Annie does not appear. Unless she chooses. I don't want to stand in front of them, Annie said. You don't have to, Nathaniel replied. She looked at him as if checking for a hidden condition. There was none. A half hour later, the front doors of the Whitmore mansion opened. The reporters surged against the gate until security held them back. Nathaniel stepped out onto the stone landing with Daniel on one side and Evelyn on the other. Detective Hayes stood near a patrol car beyond the driveway, present but careful not to turn a police investigation into theater. Annie remained inside, just behind the curtain of the breakfast room window. She could see Nathaniel's back. Straight. Still. Expensive. The kind of back that had stood before shareholders, senators, judges, and men who thought money made them brave. But this was different. This time his name was not the thing being defended. Daniel leaned toward the microphones first. Mr. Whitmore will make a brief statement. There will be no questions regarding Miss Carter's private trauma. Any outlet repeating false claims made by Marcus Reed will receive documentation through counsel. A reporter shouted anyway. Is it true she entered the home illegally? Another called, Mr. Whitmore, are you housing a runaway? Nathaniel stepped to the microphones. His voice was calm, but not empty. Annie Carter is 18 years old. She came to my home during a winter storm, asking for food and a safe place to sleep. She was not held here. She was not hidden. She was not bought, manipulated, or used. The shouting dipped slightly. He continued. Marcus Reed is not her legal guardian. He does not own her. No man owns a young woman because he has frightened her long enough. Inside, Annie pressed her hand to her mouth. Nathaniel held up a folder. We have provided law enforcement with security footage showing Mr. Reed entering my property through a service gate. After that gate was improperly accessed, we have evidence of threats, extortion demands, and an assault against Miss Carter inside my greenhouse. We also have evidence that a member of my security staff betrayed his duty and allowed that danger onto this property. A reporter called out, What do you say to claims Miss Carter stole from him? Nathaniel looked toward the voice. A lie does not become balanced because a camera repeats it. Daniel shifted, as if that line had not been approved but might survive. Another reporter pushed forward. Why involve yourself personally? This young woman was a stranger to you days ago. Nathaniel stopped. For the first time, he looked not at the cameras but at the house behind them, at the window where he knew Annie stood. Because she knocked on my door asking for shelter, he said. And somehow, she gave me back my soul. The noise changed. Not silence exactly. Something closer to a room losing its script. Nathaniel turned back to the microphones. Being poor does not make a person dishonest. Being black in a wealthy neighborhood does not make a young woman suspicious. Being afraid does not make her unstable. Miss Carter came here because she wanted to live. This house failed many things in the past. It will not fail her by staying quiet now. Daniel's face remained professional, but his eyes moved toward Nathaniel with something like respect. Detective Hayes watched from the driveway, arms folded, saying nothing. She had seen public statements used as shields, knives, distractions. This one felt different, Mary. Not perfect. Nothing public ever was. But it put the weight where it belonged. Then Marcus appeared. He pushed through a gap near the side of the reporters, face flushed, coat open, shouting before the cameras could turn fully. That's a lie, he yelled. He's paying all of you. Annie, get out here and tell them the truth. Security moved fast. But Marcus wanted to be seen more than he wanted to escape. He shoved one guard, pointed toward the house, and shouted, She belongs with me. Nathaniel stepped away from the microphones. Detective Hayes was already moving. Two officers reached Marcus before he got halfway up the drive. He fought just enough to look desperate for the cameras and guilty for the law. Hayes took his arm herself. "Marcus Reed," she said, loud enough for the closest microphones to catch. "You are under arrest for trespassing, assault, extortion, and related charges. You have the right to remain silent." Marcus twisted toward the house. "Annie, you hear me? They'll throw you out. You think these people love you?" Inside, Annie flinched, but she did not step back. Evelyn appeared beside her. "Do not let a drowning man teach you where shore is." Annie's eyes stayed on Marcus as the officers pulled him toward the patrol car. Nathaniel turned slightly, just enough to see the breakfast room window. He could not see Annie clearly through the curtain, but he knew she was there. Marcus kept shouting until the patrol car door closed. The reporters erupted with questions. Daniel stepped in front of the microphones and ended the statement. Nathaniel said nothing more. He turned and walked back into the house while cameras flashed against the melting snow. Annie was waiting in the foyer. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, reporters called his name. Inside, the house held its breath. "You didn't have to say all that," Annie said. "Yes," Nathaniel replied. "I did. They'll talk about you now. They already did. They'll say I trapped you. Let them explain how a hungry girl with a bruised wrist overpowered a man with gates, guards, lawyers, and no heart." Annie's mouth trembled. It might have become a laugh if she had not been so close to crying. "I didn't give you back your soul," she said. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. "You made me notice it was missing." Evelyn turned away, busying herself with nothing on the side table. Daniel entered behind Nathaniel, phone already buzzing. "The footage is going out to the appropriate outlets. Hayes has Marcus in custody. Carl Jensen's attorney called. He wants to discuss cooperation." Nathaniel did not take his eyes off Annie. "Good." Annie looked toward the front doors. "What happens now?" Daniel answered gently. "Now the legal work begins." Evelyn added, "And now you eat something." Annie almost smiled. "Mrs. Evelyn, a man just got arrested in the driveway, and you still need lunch." Nathaniel looked toward the kitchen. "She's right." Annie stared at him. "You too?" "I have learned not to argue with Mrs. Brooks before noon." This time, Annie did laugh. It was small, shaky, and full of leftover fear, but it was real. Outside, the cameras kept rolling. Online, the story was already changing. Some people would still believe Marcus. Some would still look at Annie and see a headline before a human being. Justice did not wash the world clean in one morning, but Marcus was in handcuffs. Carl was cornered. Annie had heard a powerful man say, in front of everyone, that she was not a thief, not a burden, not a rumor. And in the kitchen, while Evelyn warmed soup and Daniel took calls and Nathaniel stood awkwardly beside the counter, Annie Carter sat down at the table without asking if she was allowed. The house grew quieter after lunch, but it was no longer the old quiet Nathaniel had lived inside for years. This one had people in it. Daniel was in the study, sending statements and answering calls with the dry patience of a man paid to keep panic organized. Evelyn was in the kitchen, wrapping leftovers and muttering about reporters who looked too thin to be standing outside in the cold. Detective Hayes had called twice. Marcus was still in custody. Carl Jensen, through his attorney, had admitted Marcus paid him to bypass the service gate. Annie listened to all of it from the breakfast room table, hands around a mug of tea she had not touched. She should have felt safe. Safer, at least. Marcus was not outside the gate. He was not at the greenhouse door. He was not shouting her name for cameras anymore. But peace did not come just because danger was put in handcuffs. By late afternoon, she stood and began gathering dishes. Evelyn looked up. "Leave those. I can do them. You can sit." "I've been sitting." "Then practice. Some people need practice being cared for." Annie smiled because Evelyn meant it kindly, but her hands kept moving. Plates, spoons, mugs, napkins. Order gave her something to hold. If she stopped, the room filled with questions she did not know how to answer. What now? How long before they got tired of her? What happened when the news vans left and Daniel no longer needed her statement and Nathaniel no longer needed someone to protect? The thought made her throat tighten. She carried the dishes to the sink. Evelyn did not stop her this time, only watched as Annie washed each piece with careful attention, as if a clean plate could justify her place in the house. Nathaniel entered quietly enough that Annie did not hear him at first. He stood near the pantry door, watching her scrub a bowl that had already been clean for almost a full minute. "Miss Carter," she started, then set the bowl down. "Yes, sir? Daniel needs to confirm whether you want to pursue a protective order." "I do. He will help." "Thank you." He remained where he was. "You do not have to thank me every time someone does what should have been done before." Annie looked down at the sink. "I know." But she did not know. Not really. Gratitude had become a kind of rent in her life. If someone fed her, she thanked them twice. If someone let her stay, she worked until her back hurt, too. If someone believed her, she looked for a way to repay them before they changed their mind. Nathaniel seemed to understand more than she expected. "Put the bowl down." She obeyed. "Come with me." Annie dried her hands and followed him through the hall. Evelyn watched them go but did not interfere. Nathaniel led her not to the study or the dining room, but to the sitting room near the back garden. It was smaller than the formal rooms, with worn leather chairs, a low table, and windows looking out toward the snow-damp hedges. A fire had been lit. Annie guessed Evelyn had done it. Nathaniel gestured toward a chair. Annie sat on the edge. He took the chair across from her, both hands resting on the head of his cane. For a while, neither spoke. Annie could hear Daniel's voice faintly from the study, the distant hum of heating vents, the wind scraping along the glass. Finally, Nathaniel said, "Are you planning to leave?" Annie's eyes snapped to his. He did not blink. "Your backpack is half packed." She swallowed. "I didn't think you noticed. I notice more than I prefer. I wasn't going to sneak out." "No? I was going to make breakfast first." The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. "That sounds like sneaking out with manners." Annie looked at her hands. "I don't want to overstay. You were attacked yesterday." "I know. You were threatened this morning." "I know. You have no identification, no safe address, and no working phone until Daniel finishes setting up the new one." "I know all that." "Then why are you packing?" The answer came out smaller than she wanted. "Because people are kind at the beginning." Nathaniel's face changed. Annie forced herself to continue. "At first, they say stay as long as you need. Then one day they start sighing when you enter a room. They say you're family, but they remind you what they bought. They say they want to help, but they mean they want you grateful and quiet." She wiped at one eye, angry that it had betrayed her. "I don't want to wait until you regret me." Nathaniel looked toward the fire. The old version of him would have ended the conversation there. He would have called Evelyn, called Daniel, solved the housing issue with a check, and considered it mercy. But Annie was not a problem to relocate. That was what frightened him. "I regret many things," he said. "Letting you in is not one of them." She looked at him then. He kept his eyes on the fire. "For years I believed grief had made me honest. It had not. It made me narrow. I thought because I could not save Eleanor and Grace, I was excused from caring whether anyone else survived. Then you came into this house, cold, hungry, apologizing for water on the floor." Annie's lips trembled. Nathaniel looked back at her. "You did not bring life into this house by being useful. You brought it by being here." She shook her head. "I don't know how to do that." "Do what?" "Be here without earning it." He understood that sentence too well. His whole life had been built on earning, measuring, proving, acquiring. Even grief had become something he managed like an account. "You should not have had to learn love as labor," he said. Annie looked down fast, but the tears came anyway. Nathaniel let the silence protect her. He did not rush to fill it. After a while, she said, "What happens when all this is over?" "The legal case?" "Everything. Marcus. The reporters. The documents." She took a breath. "Me." Nathaniel's hands tightened around the cane. "That depends on what you want." Annie gave a small, sad laugh. "People keep asking me that now. I'm not used to having an answer." "You do not need one today." "I can't stay here forever." "Why not?" The question startled them both. Annie stared at him. "Because I'm not. I mean, I'm not your responsibility." "No," he said, "you are not a responsibility." She looked confused. He leaned forward slightly. "Daniel mentioned something. I dismissed it at first because it sounded absurd, and because I assumed you would not want it." He reminded me that adult adoption is legal in Connecticut. Annie did not move. Nathaniel continued carefully, each word chosen as if it might break if handled badly. You are 18. No one can force you. I would not try. It would not erase your mother. It would not change your name unless you wanted it. It would not make you owe me obedience or gratitude. It would simply mean, legally and publicly, that you would not have to stand alone unless you chose to. Annie's face had gone pale in a new way. Not fear this time. Shock. You want to adopt me? If you allow it. Why? He looked at her, and the answer took longer because he wanted it clean of pity. Because when Marcus grabbed you, the word daughter came out before I could stop it. I have spent a day trying to decide whether that word was grief, panic, or guilt. His voice lowered. It was not. It was truth arriving before permission. Annie covered her mouth. Nathaniel's eyes softened, though his voice stayed steady. I do not want to replace anyone you lost. I cannot be the father you should have had from the beginning. I am difficult, impatient, and very bad at breakfast conversations. A broken laugh escaped her. But I can stand beside your future, he said. If you want me there, Annie cried then. Not quietly enough to hide. Not loudly enough to lose herself. Just tears, tired and stunned, running down her face. What if I let you down? She asked. Nathaniel leaned back, and for the first time, his answer came without hesitation. You already saved me. You do not have to earn a place here. Annie pressed both hands to her face. He waited. At last she whispered, I don't know how to be somebody's daughter. Nathaniel looked toward the window, where the last light of the day lay over the garden. I do not know how to be somebody's father again. She lowered her hands. Then what do we do? We learn, he said, slowly, with help. Mrs. Brooks will insist on supervising everything anyway. From the hallway, Evelyn's voice came dry and immediate. I heard that. Annie turned, startled. Evelyn stood at the doorway with a folded blanket in her arms and wet eyes she clearly intended to deny. Nathaniel looked at her. Were you listening? I was passing by with purpose. There is no blanket closet in this direction. There is now. Annie laughed through tears. Evelyn entered and set the blanket on the sofa, as if that had been her plan all along. Then she came to Annie's chair and touched her cheek. Baby, nobody is asking you to answer with your fear still screaming. Annie nodded. Nathaniel said, Take time. Speak with Daniel. Speak with Mrs. Brooks. Say no if the answer is no. Annie looked at him. And if I say yes, then I will show up in court, sign whatever is required, and try not to embarrass you. Evelyn snorted. He will fail at the last part. Nathaniel ignored her, but Annie smiled. That evening, Annie did not pack. She went back to her room, opened the backpack, and took out the clothes she had folded. She placed them in the dresser slowly, one item at a time. It was not an answer yet, but it was not leaving. Later, when she came into the kitchen, Nathaniel stood near the stove, reading the instructions on a can of soup as if it were a contract. Annie stopped. What are you doing? Attempting dinner. That's canned tomato soup. I can read. Can you cook? No. For a moment, they looked at each other. Then Annie took the can gently from his hand. I'll show you, she said. He stepped aside. She added a little milk, black pepper, butter, and a pinch of sugar. She toasted bread with cheese in a skillet, pressing it with a spatula until the edges browned. Nathaniel watched like a man observing a negotiation he did not understand. When they sat at the kitchen table with Evelyn, the meal was simple. Soup, grilled cheese, tea. Annie dipped the sandwich into the bowl and glanced at Nathaniel. My mama made this when money was tight. Nathaniel tried it. It tastes better than it should. That means it's working. Evelyn smiled into her tea. No one said adoption again that night. They did not need to. The word had entered the house and settled there, not as a demand, but as a possibility. Outside, the snow had nearly melted from the driveway. Inside, Annie's backpack sat unpacked in the servant's room, and for the first time since she had run from Marcus Reed, she did not sleep with one hand holding the strap. A few weeks later, Annie Carter stood in a small Connecticut courtroom wearing the navy dress Evelyn had helped her choose, and the winter coat Nathaniel had insisted was not a gift but weather-appropriate equipment. She had argued with him about that phrase for 10 minutes in the kitchen. He had lost, but only because Evelyn said any man who used the word equipment for a coat deserved to be ignored. Now Annie stood beside Nathaniel before a judge with kind eyes and a stack of papers that seemed too thin to hold something as large as family. Daniel Price sat at the counsel table, one hand resting on a folder. Evelyn sat behind them in the first row with a handkerchief already in her fist, pretending she only carried it because courtrooms were dusty. Detective Laura Hayes sat beside her, off duty, in a gray coat. She had said she was only there because the case file required closure. No one believed that either. Marcus Reed was awaiting trial. Carl Jensen had taken a plea and agreed to testify that Marcus paid him to bypass the service gate. The online noise had faded the way cruel things often did once they could no longer feed on confusion. Some people apologized. Some deleted posts and pretended they had never judged a young woman they did not know. Some still muttered. Annie had learned that public opinion was not justice. It was weather. You dressed for it and kept walking. The judge looked over the documents, then at Annie. Miss Carter, you understand this is an adult adoption. You are 18. This cannot be forced on you, and it does not erase your history, your mother, or your own legal choices. Do you understand? Annie nodded, then remembered to speak. Yes, Your Honor. And this is what you want? Annie looked at Nathaniel. He did not smile. He did not push. He stood beside her with his hands folded around the top of his cane, face steady, eyes tired and open in a way they had not been when she first stepped into his house. He had told her 3 times that morning she could still change her mind. The 3rd time, Evelyn had threatened to make him sit in the car. Annie turned back to the judge. Yes, Your Honor. It means I don't have to survive alone anymore. Behind her, Evelyn made a small sound and pressed the handkerchief to her mouth. The judge's expression softened. That is as clear an answer as this court needs. Nathaniel looked down. A tear fell before he could stop it. Annie saw it and did not look away. She had learned something about tears in that house. Some were pain leaving. Some were love arriving too late to be neat. The judge signed the order. The sound of the pen moving across paper was quiet. Still, Annie felt it like a door opening. Congratulations, the judge said. Miss Carter, you may keep your name as you choose. Annie had thought about that for many nights. Carter was her mother's name. It carried sickness, rent bills, church basements, soup stretched with water, hands that braided her hair before school, and a voice that told her food could hold a soul together. Whitmore was not a replacement. It was a roof she had chosen. I'd like to be Annie Carter Whitmore, she said. Nathaniel closed his eyes for a moment. Daniel cleared his throat and looked very hard at his papers. After court, no one knew what to do in the hallway. Evelyn hugged Annie first because Evelyn did not ask permission for things the heart had already settled. Annie held on longer than she meant to. Detective Hayes shook Nathaniel's hand, then Annie's. You did well, Hayes said. I was scared, Annie answered. Hayes gave her a small smile. Still not the opposite. Daniel offered Nathaniel a pen. You may want to keep this. Signed your second life with it. Nathaniel took it. That is sentimental for a lawyer. I'll deny it under oath. That made Annie laugh. And Nathaniel did too. Not much. Not loudly. But enough that Evelyn turned toward him, as if she had heard church bells. 1 year later, the Whitmore mansion no longer looked like a house holding its breath. The front curtains opened every morning. The kitchen smelled of coffee, butter, cinnamon, onions, or whatever Annie was testing for culinary school. The piano in the music room had been tuned. Sometimes Evelyn played hymns badly and blamed the instrument. Sometimes Annie hummed along while rolling biscuit dough. Nathaniel never asked them to stop. Grace's room had changed the least and the most. The bed remained. The books remained. The little boots remained beside the chair. But there were fresh flowers on the dresser now, replaced every Friday by Annie, not to cover grief, to keep it company. Nathaniel had created Grace Whitmore House 6 months after the adoption, a foundation and shelter network for young women leaving violent homes, with special outreach for girls who were ignored because they were poor, black, undocumented, too young, too old, too frightened, or too tired to tell their stories perfectly. Evelyn served on the board because she said rich people needed supervision. Daniel handled the legal structure. Detective Hayes trained volunteers on what not to say to a survivor. Annie helped design the kitchen program. Her first rule was simple. Anyone who came in hungry ate before paperwork. On Christmas Eve, snow fell again over Greenwich. Not hard, just enough to soften the hedges and turn the long driveway white. Inside, the dining table that once seated only silence now held Evelyn, Daniel, Detective Hayes, two staff members who had stayed late by invitation, Nathaniel, and Annie. The food was not what Nathaniel's old chef would have called elegant. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, macaroni and cheese, warm rolls, peach cobbler, and tomato soup in a small pot because Annie said every family should remember where it began. Nathaniel took a bite of cobbler and paused. Annie noticed at once. Too much cinnamon? He looked at her across the table. The firelight caught her face, older than the frightened girl at the door and still young enough to tease him without mercy. No, he said. For the first time in years, everything is exactly enough. The table went quiet. Then Evelyn sniffed and blamed the pepper. After dinner, Annie carried a small wooden sign to the front entrance. Nathaniel followed her to the inside of the iron gate. She had ordered the sign herself with money from her first paid internship at a local bakery. She would not let Nathaniel reimburse her. Together, they hung it where anyone leaving the property could see it. No one who comes here cold will be turned away. Annie stepped back and folded her arms against the winter air. Nathaniel stood beside her. You once asked me to let you stay, and you did, she said. No. He looked at the gate, then at the warm windows behind them. You let me come back. Annie leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. He did not stiffen. He did not step away. After a moment, he lifted one arm and held her there. Beyond the gate, snow touched the road. Inside, the house glowed. It was still a mansion, still marked by money and loss and rooms full of memory. But it was no longer a mausoleum. It had become a home, and for every person who would one day arrive cold, hungry, frightened, or ashamed, the light at the Whitmore gate would tell them what Annie Carter Whitmore had once needed to hear most. Come in. You are not trouble. You are human. The lesson of